Chapter 108. Otsutsuki Haruo frowned slightly. Seeing Dustless looking at her like a monster, she raised her nose and stared at Dustless with dissatisfaction. Her clear eyes flashed with a hint of slyness. "I might as well tell you, if you had refused me." Her eyes circled around Dustless. Her slender fingers pointed to her chin. The banter on Otsutsuki Haruo's pretty face became more intense. Her beautiful face had a charming little dimple, and her whole body was full of unprecedented coquettishness, like a deadly poison, like a peerless enchantress, full of unprecedented attractiveness. Turning his head with an extremely unnatural expression, Dustless hurriedly avoided Otsutsuki Haruo's clear and spotless eyes, fearing that his heart would be seen through by those eyes that seemed to be able to see through everything. What will happen?" There was a rare tremor in his voice. Dustless also wanted to know, if he refused Otsutsuki Haruo's unreasonable request, would this woman go crazy and chase him to the ends of the earth? "Of course. I will chase you to the earth and cut you into pieces." Blinking her eyes, looking at Dustless who didn't dare to look at her, Otsutsuki Haruo said very seriously. Her breathing was steady, her heartbeat was also extremely normal, and her face was as usual, without the slightest hint of joking. "Then I am still alive now. Shouldn't I thank you for not killing me?" The corner of his eyes twitched vigorously. Dustless rolled his eyes speechlessly, deliberately dragging his voice. Looking at the complacent Otsutsuki Haruo, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Otsutsuki Haruo nodded very seriously, apparently what Dustless meant. "Are we just going to leave this brat here?" Looking at Rin who continued to sleep, Dustless frowned and asked Otsutsuki Haruo. "Uchiha Obito is not easy to deal with. We must not let him see any flaws, otherwise, we can only lift a stone and smash our own feet." Dustless naturally understood Uchiha Obito's madness. The reason why Uchiha Madara spent so much time and effort to make him completely fall was also to set off Obito's extraordinary ability. "No, don't worry after all. Uchiha Obito is still a kid. As for this little girl..." Otsutsuki Haruo signaled Dustless that there was no need to care about Uchiha Obito's problem, then looked at Rin and whispered, "Send her back to Konoha's base, and then control her mind with Tennigan." As for Uchiha Obito's matter, Dustless didn't need to worry about it. Uchiha Madara gave this task to White Zetsu. Maybe Obito was rescued by White Zetsu, and he was facing Madara's attack. Send her back to Konoha's base. After saying that, Dustless put on the spiral mask again. After all, the world already knew that he was completely dead, and he was very good at controlling the world behind the scenes. Konoha's ninja base. Konoha's ninjas were really the most resilient existence. Although they were fighting with the Rock's ninjas all day and night, they didn't feel the lack of physical strength, and they were still fighting with high morale. Konoha's brainwashing was very successful. Compared to the tired Rock's ninjas, they were much more confident. "It's been a long time, Konoha." Looking at the bonfire in the distance, Konoha's ninjas were obviously preparing dinner, Dustless said with emotion. Once upon a time, he was loyal to Konoha's vanguard, the captain of the fire brigade. Wherever there was a fire, he was the vanguard. The girl Dustless was holding in his right arm was naturally Rin Noera. His figure swept into Konoha's ninja village like a ghost. His movements were extremely skillful. Although Konoha's ninja village had a lot of defense barriers around it, they didn't have any effect on him. His body was transparent, and he ignored the barriers, and he easily invaded. "Goodbye, tragic child crushed by the gears of time." Glancing at Rin, who was sleeping peacefully, Dustless was about to turn around and leave, but suddenly a dazzling golden light flashed beside him, and immediately a man with blonde hair and dark blue eyes appeared in front of him, holding a high-speed rotating chakra energy ball in his hand. It was Namikaze Minato, who had the title Yellow Flash. Boom! Dustless under the Rasengan mask smiled indifferently, and immediately jumped horizontally, easily avoiding the attack of the Rasengan. The Rasengan hit the ground, and blasted a deep hole in the ground. "It's a pity, you are fast, but I am faster than you." Floating in the air indifferently, Dustless said. Now for him who controlled the Tensigan, floating in the air was just a trivial matter. "You can float." Seeing Dustless floating in the air, Namikaze Minato's dark blue eyes were filled with surprise. It may be a trivial matter for Dustless, but looking at the whole world, there are only a few people who can float in the air without external help, definitely not more than 5. But you are still wrong. His pupils suddenly flashed with cold light, and in an instant, Namikaze Minato appeared behind Dustless floating in the air, and the Rasengan in his hand was much bigger than before. I'm still faster than you. After that, the Rasengan in Namikaze Minato's hand roared and smashed toward Dustless's back. So that's how it is. You are indeed the man who will be the 4th Hokage in the future. Slightly turning his head, looking at the ninjutsu mark on his shoulder, Dustless frowned slightly, and immediately remembered the Flying Thunder God Jutsu. And then his eyebrows relaxed, and his face showed a clear color. The Flying Thunder God Jutsu left on me in advance when he attacked me, really smart and cunning. But what can I do? Dustless said to himself without looking back, and his face was indifferent, letting the rapidly rotating Rasengan close to him. Chapter 109. His dark blue eyes stared at Wu Chen's back, and he didn't move at all. Seeing that Wu Chen didn't dodge and let the Rasengan touch his body, Minato's eyebrows unconsciously raised, and his brows wrinkled, forming a clear Chuan character. Is it possible that he can ignore my ninjutsu or, holding his kunai to defend against Dustless, Minato stared at Dustless, and at the same time, his eyes locked on Dustless's Rasengan, and his breathing became unusually heavy. This is... Seeing the Rasengan close to Dustless's back, Minato's pupils instantly widened, and his face was full of disbelief. He thought that Dustless's physical fitness was strong enough to be used as steel, but he would still be injured, but in fact, it was not the case. The Rasengan was like a grain of sand sinking into the sea, without the slightest ripple. The moment it entered Dustless's body, it was instantly absorbed by a special force. Dustless's body was like a black hole in the depths of the universe, with endless devouring power. Is it a space ninjutsu that transferred the Rasengan? Looking at the masked man Dustless with uncertain eyes, Minato's heart fell to the bottom. In fact, he hoped that this was a space ninjutsu similar to Flying Thunder God, but he always had a feeling that it wasn't. It meant that this was a ninjutsu that he had never seen before, and it was likely to be stranger than space ninjutsu. Often the unknown is more dangerous. Don't show such a surprised expression. That was just a trick to fool children. Seeing Namikaze Minato on guard, Dustless smiled faintly, and his tone was indeed insignificant. In fact, Dustless just used the ability of Tensigen to absorb chakra. But even so, for Namikaze Minato, who had never seen such a strange situation before, it was indeed worthy of him being extremely cautious. The gap between you and me is too big. In fact, for the future, erasing you is just a matter of a moment. Staring at Minato's face, Dustless under the spiral mask said very calmly. Minato's biggest advantage was the absolute speed shown by the Flying Thunder God. But it didn't pose any threat to Dustless, and the effect was minimal. If you can come at me. Namikaze Minato turned a deaf ear to Wu Chen's sarcasm. His aura was calm, and his heart was as calm as an ancient well, as if it was made of iron. He was not moved at all, but simply frowned. You'll know what it means to not kill you. The corner of his mouth raised a strange smile. Even with the mask covering his face, Minato could hear the sound of his mouth grinding, which made him feel uncomfortable, especially uncomfortable, and had a creepy feeling. After all, you're not in the set of the script. Casually glancing at Minato, Dustless's eyes suddenly fell on Rin, who was lying motionless on the ground. His dark pupils twisted sharply, and his right eye turned into a blue Tensigen. Under Minato's surprised gaze, Dustless's Tensigen in his right eye flashed with a strong fluctuation of dojutsu. What kind of eye is that? It gives me a horrible feeling. Naturally, Namikaze Minato saw spotless Tensigen, especially the berserk eye power that could forcibly distort time and space, which made him feel a palpitation and fear from the depths of his soul. Perhaps, as Dustless said before, maybe killing Minato was just a matter of thought. Ouch! At the same time Rin, who was lying on the ground sleeping, suddenly opened her eyes. Her eyes were scarlet, and a strong chakra disaster appeared on her body. Her skin was covered with a bijou coat, and her eyes were filled with endless killing intent. A roar similar to a beast came out of Rin's mouth. Go! Her pupils suddenly widened, and the Tensigen once again flashed with a strong fluctuation of dojutsu. Rin's chakra erupted again, and she went straight to the front where Konoha's ninjas were preparing to attack. A ruthless slaughter was about to begin. Although it's the opposite of the original design concept of the script, at least it's not in vain. Letting out a sigh of relief, Wu Chen's anxious heart was put down. Although the person was wrong, it was not a big deal. Originally, Rin was willing to die under Kakashi's chakra, but the current situation was different. The difference was not small, but in short, as long as Obito completely fell, nothing else mattered. That's the chakra of the bijou. Looking at Rin rushing towards Konoha's ninjas with a pale face, even if Minato's state of mind was good, at this moment, he was still angry, and his anger continued to burn his reason. You actually sealed the Sambai in Rin's body. What is your so-called script? She's just an ordinary ninja. She shouldn't be worthy of being used by someone like you. Looking at Dustless, Minato's eyes were filled with killing intent, and at the same time, he couldn't help but worry about Rin's future. Even if he can subdue her, will she still be accepted after killing Konoha's ninjas? Obviously not. There's no need to worry about her future. Seeing through Minato's naive attitude, Dustless's eyes were cold, and he said coldly, Rin will die, and the person who will kill her with your own hands will be your teacher Minato. After saying that, Dustless sneered. Originally, according to the script, the person who should kill Rin should be Kakashi. However, perhaps because of the appearance of Dustless, many of Kakashi's scripts were snatched away by Dustless. Of course, although Kakashi was successfully promoted to Jonin, according to the current situation, Kakashi, the white-haired kid, was not in Konoha's base. Therefore, the task of killing Rin could only be done by Minato and Beitai. Chapter 110. In the dark depths of the underground, Madara was no longer the same as before. The color in his pupils had obviously dimmed, and he had lost his luster. All the cells in his body were completely necrotic, and he was powerless. It was as if as long as the wind gently brushed his body, he would completely pass away. Despite having the Gedo Mazo to prolong his life, Uchiha Madara has been struggling at death's door for decades. Now it can be said that he is completely exhausted. He has reached his limit, and there is no hope for him to continue. Madara-sama, that kid seems to have woken up. White Zetsu respectfully looked at Uchiha Madara, who was bowing his head in contemplation. Even though Madara was already in his twilight years, and could die at any time, White Zetsu didn't dare to make a sound, and his tone was always respectful. Anyone who underestimates Uchiha Madara will step into a place of no return. That kid's vitality is quite strong. He didn't die even after being smashed like that. He's really lucky. Madara looked at the boy lying on the stone bed, and his old eyes flashed with deep surprise. Half of his body was smashed, but he was still able to hold on until White Zetsu came to save him. This extremely strong vitality surprised him. But it's because of such a strong and extraordinary talent that he's valuable to me. Madara walked over with heavy steps, and laughed in his heart. Obito was undoubtedly very suitable to carry out his Eye of the Moon plan, and now it's up to him to fool him. At this moment, Obito's whole body was wrapped in bandages, and his face was pale as if he had just recovered from a serious illness. His pupils were slightly opened, and it seemed that he hadn't adapted yet. He glanced back and forth at the surrounding environment, and his face was filled with endless hesitation. Uchiha clan's undead. An old and weak voice rang out. Although he tried his best to maintain his imposing manner, anyone could hear that he was lacking in power. You are, it hurts. Obito raised his head, and looked at the old man walking towards him with a black scythe in his hand. Obito's pupils shrank as he was filled with fear. Just as he was about to scream, his bandaged body started to crack again, and a lot of blood oozed out of it. He was in so much pain that he didn't want to live anymore. Even so, he endured the piercing pain all over his body, and looked at the old man in horror. I am Uchiha Madara. When he arrived in front of Obito, Madara's eyes turned sharply, and his murky old eye sockets emitted a power that was countless times stronger than Obito's. Madara's aura became even more powerful, and his old face, which had been dead for many years, showed some color. Are you a human or a ghost? Is this the underworld? When Obito saw Madara's face, he was so scared that he stood up and looked at Madara with fear. Especially when he saw the sharp black scythe in his hand, his heart was in his throat, and he couldn't help but gulp. You didn't die. You were miraculously saved by my subordinates, and this is not the underworld. Of course, it's not wrong to think that this is the underworld. After looking at Obito carefully for a moment, Madara slowly said, and his eyes flashed with disappointment. This chess piece, whether in strength or wisdom, was worse than Dustless. When Dustless saw Obito, he was very surprised and couldn't believe it. Compared to Obito, who looked like he had seen a ghost, Dustless was much stronger. Boy, do you see the cruelty of this world? After a helpless sigh, Madara abandoned his dissatisfaction with Obito, and his eyes flashed with a bright light, which made Obito scared. Cruelty? It seemed that Obito was scared by Madara's appearance, and his eyes were empty and gray. He temporarily lost the ability to think, and could only follow Madara's will. What does this mean? Looking at Madara, Obito didn't know if it was subconscious or mechanical. It doesn't matter if you don't understand. Hearing this, Madara nodded faintly and immediately said, because you are weak. You are trampled by the enemy. Because you are weak, you can't protect your friends. Because you are weak, you can't protect your loved ones. Because you are weak, you can only be indifferent to the destruction of your loved ones. Old man, what do you mean? Hearing this, Obito looked at Madara, who was talking nonsense. If Madara didn't say that he was the one who saved him, Obito would have kicked him out. The little girl named Rin Noira is in trouble. Madara looked up at White Zetsu, indicating that he should say it. Rin, what did you say? Hearing White Zetsu say that Rin was in trouble, Obito jumped up like a cat whose tail was stepped on. He ignored his injuries and looked at White Zetsu coldly. The Mist Ninja sealed the Sambai in her body, and now she's causing trouble in Konoha's camp. Looking at Obito's eyes, White Zetsu felt uncomfortable and said, Rin seems to have been completely controlled by the Bijou, and now she's become a killing machine. Boom! Perhaps because half of his body was made up of Hashirama's cells, Obito felt much stronger than before, and the amount of chakra in his body increased a lot. He directly shattered the stone bed he was lying on. An endless killing intent floated in his eyes. His body rushed out like a cannonball. Madara-sama, if we ignore that kid. Seeing Obito leave, White Zetsu frowned and looked quite distressed. It doesn't matter. You go and inform Dustless that Obito is here. And it's time to start the show, and welcome Obito's first and only audience. Chapter 111. Konoha's Ninja Village Station. A girl wearing a crimson bijou coat was as fast as lightning, shuttling between Konoha's ninjas. Every time she raised her sword, she would take away a large number of Konoha's ninjas. She was like a killing machine, mercilessly slaughtering Konoha's ninjas. Slowly savor the remaining time. With a cunning smile on his face, Dustless's voice sounded like a ghost, but his body became more and more ethereal, and his whole body completely lost its texture. Don't even think about escaping. Seeing Dustless's figure showing signs of dissipating, Minato's eyes immediately swept over, and his body appeared behind Dustless in the next second. I said, the gap is too big. The reason why I didn't kill you is because you're the best actor in this show. Slightly turning back, revealing half of his mask, the Tensigan surged with endless cold light. Dustless's clothes suddenly fluttered, and with himself as the center, the incomparably tyrannical repulsive force spread directly in all directions. The repulsive force erupted, forming a hollow area. Boom! Minato was suddenly hit by the repulsive force. The invisible repulsive force couldn't be touched at all, and he couldn't defend against it. His body was instantly bounced out, fragile and powerless like a broken kite, flying upside down and slamming into the rock wall. Sure enough, it's a very troublesome thing, but it doesn't have any effect on me. looking at the space coordinates of the flying thunder god on his shoulder. Dustless's mouth raised with contempt, and immediately the chakra erupted, and the unique mark of the flying thunder god disappeared. Dustless's body then disappeared, and on Konoha's station, only Rin was left, completely under the control of the Bijou or Dustless's Tensigen. Her thin figure was like a machine, killing Konoha's ninjas without any emotion. Compared with the usual gentle and pure Rin, she was like a demon from hell at this moment. The strength of the Sanbai is at the bottom of the Bijou list. Compared to the Kyubi or the Hachibi, it's naturally a world of difference. But for Konoha's ninjas, it's an unprecedented terror. It can easily crush them like ants. Especially the Bijudama that flew out from time to time. It was even more irresistible. It destroyed the sky and destroyed the earth. Even the mountains that came in contact with it easily collapsed. It made Konoha's ninjas completely desperate. The situation was completely one-sided. Lin, stop. They are all your former companions. Minato looked bitterly at Rin, who was killing Konoha's ninjas. Minato's dark blue eyes were scarlet, and his hatred for Dustless was even more intense. He had never hated a person so much. He hated him so thoroughly, and he couldn't wait to tear him to pieces. Hearing Minato's heartache, it seemed to awaken her inner reason. Rin's fierce offensive suddenly stopped, and her eyes that were full of havoc also recovered a little bit of clarity. She looked at Minato with a pale face. Although Rin couldn't speak, Minato could hear her cry for help. It was a sense of powerlessness that originated from the depths of her soul. This is really an unpleasant scene. Seeing Rin's little universe erupting just now and resisting his control, Wu Chen, who was secretly observing from a distance, was taken aback. Immediately, the corner of his mouth turned cold, and a more powerful eye power surged out from the Tensigen in his right eye. Rin, who was struggling to resist Dustless's control, once again fought Konoha's ninjas, like the autumn wind sweeping the fallen leaves, raging Konoha's ninjas. Damn the masked man. Seeing this, Minato's heart became more gloomy. He took a deep breath, and a flash of determination flashed through his eyes. It seems that between Rin and Konoha's ninjas, he must make a choice. Dustless-sama. At Dustless's feet, White Zetsu poked his head out from the ground and looked at Rin, who was strangling Konoha's ninjas, and said, "Uchiha Obito is coming." Hearing this, Dustless nodded slightly, and immediately a cold light flashed in his eyes, and said indifferently, "That's for the best, almost all the actors are here. It seems that the big show can start." White Zetsu also nodded. Whoosh! The golden light suddenly exploded, turning into a straight ray of light that swept towards Rin. Looking up, she saw Minato holding a kunai in front of Rin, with a cold expression on his face. It's nice to see a master and disciple killing each other. Seeing this, Dustless smiled faintly. His calm eyes continued to manipulate Noira Rin and Namikaze Minato to fight. Noira Rin's strength was naturally not as good as Namikaze Minato. Even if she transformed into a tailed beast, she was not as strong as Namikaze Minato. However, due to the control of Dustless, he was evenly matched with Namikaze Minato, and he even had a slight advantage. Rasengan. Seeing Rin rushing towards him again, Minato's eyes narrowed, and his chakra surged, and in his hand was a high-speed rotating chakra energy ball, which was his specialty Rasengan. Good chance. In the distance, Dustless saw Minato's murderous intent, and his mouth suddenly raised a smirk, and the Tensigen suddenly turned into a normal human's eyes, and he took back his power, and at the same time suppressed the Sanbai's power in Rin's body. Pucci. Losing Dustless's power and the Sanbai's power, Rin immediately turned back to the original fragile little girl, and her flexible abdomen was instantly torn into pieces by the high-speed rotating Rasengan, and became a bloody mess. This, looking at Rin's abdomen, Namikaze Minato's pupils instantly widened, and he was shocked. He didn't expect Rin to be pierced by him. Instead, his Rasengan was sent flying just like before. Senseiyu. Rin, who recovered, looked at the arm inserted in her chest in horror. She expected to die, but the one who didn't kill her was her most respected sensei. And this scene was seen by Uchiha Obito, Chapter 112. The emotions of the Uchiha clan have always been emotional. The Sharingan is also known as the soul portrayal eye. The Uchiha clan has always had great love. And once they lose their love, a special chakra will emerge from the brain, reflecting the visual nerves and causing changes to the eyes. This process is known as eye-opening. Seeing the love of his life die at the hands of Minato, Uchiha Obito's pupils suddenly turned sharply, surpassing the world's understanding of the Sharingan. The two-tomo Sharingan in his eyes suddenly turned into the legendary Mangekyo Sharingan. Namake's Minato. Obito's face suddenly became distorted, terrifying like a ghost. Seeing Rin's abdomen being twisted into pieces by Minato, hatred continued to attack the remaining reason in his mind. A burning murderous intent that he had never felt before appeared in his mind, and a cold murderous intent floated out of his body, causing the surrounding temperature to drop to the freezing point. Boom! Just when Obito couldn't suppress his anger, and was about to kill Minato, a figure jumped out of the void and kicked Obito away. It's amazing. He actually broke the rules of the Uchiha clan's eye-opening. With only two tomo, he can directly open the Mangekyo Sharingan. After kicking Obito away, Dustless looked at Obito's Mangekyo Sharingan in surprise. The way he looked at Obito also changed. If Obito was at the bottom of the list, then there is no such thing as a genius in the world. Recalling the history of Uchiha Obito's Sharingan, Dust felt that he was weak. When he opened his Sharingan, it was the Sharingan with two tomo, and it was the same with the Mangekyo. The so-called common sense was trampled on and worthless in front of Uchiha Obito. Who the hell are you? Looking at Dustless, who was also wearing a mask, Obito, who was kicked away by Dustless, shouted hysterically at Dustless, his eyes full of beast-like madness. I advise you to save it. Rin has already been killed by Minato. This is an undeniable fact. Dustless's voice didn't completely fall, and Obito appeared in front of him, with a sharp kunai aimed at Dustless's neck. It looked like he wanted to completely split Dustless in two. You may be my opponent in the future, but right now you're still too young. Even with your Mangekyo Sharingan, you're still so weak, as small as an ant. Staring at Obito's murderous face, Dustless smiled faintly, especially when he looked at the kunai coming towards him. He shook his head with contempt. This kind of child's toys can't hurt me, let alone kill me. Shaking his head, Dustless looked at Obito with pity. Rin was killed by him, but the act still has to go on. He can't say that his little lover was killed by me, right? Although Dustless sympathized with Obito, there were too many people in the world who had a hard life, just like the sand in the Ganges. Whoosh! The sharp kunai pierced through Dustless's body, but Dustless himself was fine. Obito looked at Dustless in a daze. This was the first time he saw such a strange scene in his life. For a moment, his hatred for Minato disappeared, and his eyes were dull. Under the surprised gaze of Uchiha Obito, Dustless's finger rose and stopped at Uchiha Obito's eyebrows, and then he flicked it lightly. Boom! Although Dustless just flicked his finger casually and didn't even touch his face, Obito felt like he was kicked by a thick leg that weighed thousands of pounds. This guy isn't Kyuubi's cousin, is he? Obito's mouth twitched, and his tone was full of surprise, looking at Dustless in disbelief. However, White Zetsu on the side was unusually calm. Someone who can fight with Madara can't be ordinary. Now you realize how fragile you are. The Mangekyo Sharingan is not invincible, especially you, who only has one Mangekyo Sharingan. It's impossible for you to be the opponent of Minato. Looking at Obito's unwilling face, Dustless shook his head. He spent a lot of effort to turn Obito into the black, and he didn't want him to die in vain. Minato's strength was also not bad. Not to mention that Obito had just opened his Mangekyo, and he didn't have complete control of the Mangekyo Sharingan. Even if Obito attacked Konoha in the future, Minato didn't get any advantage, and instead got himself into trouble. Rin is my everything, and anyone who stands in the way of my revenge is the enemy of Uchiha Obito. His mask was broken by Dustless, and Obito no longer hid his identity. He gritted his teeth and said to Dustless, "You seem to know that old man Uchiha Madara. Although he saved me, if you stop me, I will kill you." Obito's face was full of killing intent. and his mangekyo flashed with a demonic light. Obviously he was serious. Just you? Hearing this, Dustless was stunned at first, and then immediately sneered at Obito. Even Madara didn't dare to say that he could take him down. He didn't expect that this kid would dare to say that he could kill him. It seems that the lesson just now didn't make him more aware of his strength, but made him even more arrogant. A mere firefly's light wants to shine with the moon. Well, today I will let you see how weak you are. Looking at Obito's stubborn face, Dustless suddenly made a decision in his heart. It was good to teach Obito a lesson now, lest this kid keep staring at him in the future. Maybe one day he would be bold enough to plot against him. In that case, I will let you see the power of the legendary Mangekyo Sharingan. Chapter 113. The Sharingan is the soul portrayal eye. Everyone's pursuit is different, so their abilities are different. Among them, Uchiha Obito and Uchiha Shisui are the best. Whether it is Obito's Kamui or Shisui's Kodo Amatsukami, both are extremely powerful ninjutsu, especially Shisui, which has almost no means of defense. No matter who you are, I advise you to mind your own business. The ability of my Mangekyo Sharingan is not something you can defend against. Staring at Dustless, who was wearing a spiral mask, Obito's tone was cold, and he didn't hide his killing intent, but he still didn't make a move. Whether it's because of Uchiha Obito's fear of Dustless's strength or some other reason, there's no doubt about it. Although the current Uchiha Obito has been corrupted, it can be seen that he still has a conscience for the time being. If it was the future Uchiha Obito, he might have already killed Dustless. Come at me, no ninjutsu is effective in front of me. Dustless smiled happily under the mask, and his eyes were always calm. Although the ability of Kamui is elusive, there are also loopholes and shortcomings. The basic principle is to transfer one's body or other objects from the real space to another space, interfering with the real space to achieve various effects. The biggest weakness is that when absorbing or releasing objects, the body must be solid, and because the chakra must be concentrated in the eyes to launch Kamui, the body is vulnerable to attack. The later Yondaime of Konami Namikaze Minato used this ability to cause physical damage to Obito, and some can only be used for passive defense, and can't attack others. Since you're not coming, I'll go. Seeing that Obito didn't move for a long time, Dustless frowned slightly and immediately changed from defense to offense. His whole body turned into a shining light as he crossed the space, and almost instantly appeared in front of Obito. Laser. Dustless, who intended to teach Obito a lesson, naturally didn't hold back, and directly swept a beam, of course, aiming at Obito's arm. After all, Dustless still needs him. Boom! The golden light passed through Obito's body, and broke a few trees not far behind him. Just the power shown casually gave a feeling of destruction. Penetrated. The golden light passed through Obito's body, but there was no wound on his body. Obviously, he had already guessed that Dustless would attack, and was prepared in advance, and grasped the timing very well. But so what in the face of absolute speed? Any ability is pale and powerless. After a brief surprise, Dustless's mouth raised a cold light, and at this time, Obito, who had finished Obito, took the opportunity to pull away from Dustless. This guy's strength is terrifying. Staring at Dustless, Uchiha Obito thought to himself with a vigilant expression, "Since you want to cross over my body to avenge Noira Rin, why are you pulling away from me?" Dustless glanced at Obito from the corner of his eyes, and said indifferently, "You will never be able to avenge that little girl. You're just trying to cover up your powerlessness, because you can't touch me." In response to Dustless's sneer, Obito also chose to ridicule him. In his opinion, Dustless was just trying to cover up his embarrassment and protest. The ignorant are fearless. Hearing this, Dustless couldn't help but shake his head. In fact, as long as you know the principle of Kamui, it's very easy to crack it. As long as Dustless wanted to, he could almost instantly crush Obito. "Have you ever been kicked at the speed of light, Obito?" A lazy voice sounded. Wu-chan squinted his eyes and looked at Uchiha Obito lazily. Unconsciously, he also liked Kazara's catchphrase. Obito was taken aback, and after thinking about it, He frowned and looked at Dustless. It doesn't matter if you don't understand. No one in the world understands the speed of light. Seeing Obito's puzzled look, Dustless just smiled casually, and then his eyes became cold, and he said coldly, "You will soon understand what the speed of light is, little devil." Speed of light kick. Boom! As soon as Dustless's voice fell, Obito was kicked away, and even with the terrifying insight of Mangekyo, he couldn't see the trajectory of Dustless's movement. Obito didn't see how Dustless ran over. This guy, Pucci. Looking at the deep hole in his chest, Obito's face was pale, and he spat out red blood from the corner of his mouth. He finally understood the meaning of Dustless's words. It means that when Dustless's body glows with golden light, everything will end. This is the speed of light. Tsukuyomi. Taking advantage of Obito's sluggish look, Dustless used Tsukuyomi's powerful Genjutsu to instantly put him down. This kid is simply courting death by challenging Minato now. He can wait until Kyuubi attacks Konoha in the future. Dustless. Looking at the unconscious Obito, Dustless's eyes were emotionless, and then he looked up at the sky, and his eyes looked at the void in front of him with contempt, and his aura was extremely cold. It was even more domineering than Madara. Dustless-sama. White Zetsu suddenly came out from the depths of the ground, his face full of respect. As the saying goes, the onlooker sees the game best. Why did Dustless give Obito the time to launch Kamui? He should have been able to kill Obito instantly, just like now. Uchiha Madara may not understand, but White Zetsu saw through it. The reason why Obito used Kamui was deliberately done by Dustless. That was to completely destroy his confidence, and to tell Madara that in the face of absolute speed, any technique is invalid. Chapter 114. White Zetsu didn't know the true strength of Uchiha Wuchen, and he didn't want to know. In his opinion, those who tried to test Wuchen's true strength must have been completely wiped out, crushed like insects. Of course, those who Dustless deliberately let go were excluded. "Bring this little brat back," said Wuchen indifferently. He didn't even look at Baizu. Then, he walked away and soon disappeared from everyone's sight. On the other side in the Rain Village, a different scene was playing out. The Rain Village, as its name suggests, has 4 seasons throughout the year. This village has always been closed off from the outside world, giving people an extremely mysterious feeling. However, due to the existence of Hanzo the Salamander, who has the title of demigod, although the outside world is very curious about the existence of this village, not many people dare to enter without permission. Even if a demigod isn't a god, it's still a super powerful existence, on the same level as the leaders of the 5 great villages. It's really interesting. I love to see people killing each other. Wu Chen was wearing a cloak. His dark eyes were full of interest as he watched the 2 parties fighting. A wicked smile appeared on his face, which made people shudder with fear. The 2 sides were wearing different costumes, but their appearance was similar, and they were staring at each other fiercely. Obviously, they belonged to 2 opposing groups, and the group wearing the Rain Ninja's costume obviously had the upper hand. The centaur who had the upper hand looked down at the crowd below with disdain and complacency on their faces. "Yahiko Nagato, get out of here, this guy is obviously coming for you too." An anxious and worried voice came from the mouth of the purple-haired girl, who was tightly bound by 2 burly Rain Ninjas, and couldn't move. The people fighting below were the Rain Ninjas of the Akatsuki and Hanzo the Salamander. The girl with light blue-purple hair, who was shouting at Yahiko and Nagato to leave, was undoubtedly Konan. The situation in front of them was as clear as a mirror. The Akatsuki's Konan was captured by Hanzo, so she was naturally at a disadvantage, and the Rain Ninjas were all proud of themselves. Still as stupid as before. Staring at Konan's anxious face, Dustless disdainfully curled his lips. Yahiko was an optimistic person who valued his teammates very much, and he would never leave. There's no cure for this idiot. Looking at Yahiko, Wu Chen's eyes flashed with deep disdain. It was precisely because this kid listened to Hanzo's slanderous words that Xiao Xiao fell into his trap, and Konan was caught. It was entirely his own fault. He can't blame anyone else. "Release Konan, I'll spare your life, Hanzo the Salamander," Uzumaki Nagato's eyes swept with endless cold light, and stared at the man with an iron mask on the cliff in front of him, and his cold voice spread, accompanied with endless killing intent, which made people's scalp numb. This kid's control of the Rinnegan seems to have become better than before. Dustless slightly pressed down the cloak on his head, and his pupils flashed with a touch of surprise, and he was quite surprised. Obviously, after the short fight with Dustless last time, Nagato knew the gap between his strength and Dustless's, so he deliberately went back to train and familiarize himself with the various abilities of the Rinnegan. Idiot, if it weren't for your eyes, you wouldn't be able to use some jutsu. Dustless sighed for Nagato, and shook his head. Even if Nagato worked hard for 100 years, he still wouldn't be able to use Madara's soul, border prison jutsu. Just like how Dustless transplanted Madara's Rinnegan, he didn't have the confidence to use the soul, border prison jutsu. Only by thoroughly defeating Madara through the system can he take everything from him. Let her go. On the cliff, Hanzo the salamander was wearing a mask, but everyone could see the contempt on his face, and he sneered. You can't let this girl go, unless you kill her. Hanzo the salamander said to the red-haired Nagato, and at the same time pointed to the orange-haired Yahiko. You want to fight me? I'm still too inexperienced. Hanzo the salamander's eyes swept over Nagato and Yahiko, and he was extremely proud of himself. In fact, before this plan to deceive the Akatsuki, he spent a lot of time and effort to investigate the three leaders of the Akatsuki: Yahiko, Nagato, and Konan. After knowing that Yahiko was a person who valued friendship and righteousness, he came up with this plan. If Yahiko was a person with a heart of stone, such a plan wouldn't work on him. How do you choose the leader of the Akatsuki, Yahiko? Hanzo the salamander stared at the expressionless Yahiko with a gloomy and terrible look. His friend's choice was the same as his own life, and for him, it was the most interesting topic in life. Nagato, kill me. Yahiko turned around and said indifferently to Nagato. His eyes were full of despair at the prospect of death. Yahiko, are you crazy? Nagato looked at Yahiko in disbelief. Hanzo the salamander was obviously plotting against them. Even if he killed Yahiko, he was sure that he wouldn't let Konan and the Akatsuki go. However, Yahiko just smiled indifferently, looking at the kunai in Nagato's hand. He didn't hesitate to rush forward. Poochie! Bright red blood dripped to the ground, and a sad atmosphere spread. Looking up, Yahiko's abdomen was pierced with a sharp kunai. Nagato looked at Yahiko, who was willing to die under his hands, and his eyes were full of despair. Due to excessive sadness, he lost his ability to think. This problematic child is finally King dead. Dustless in the distance breathed a sigh of relief. If Yahiko's death hadn't made Nagato despair, Dustless wouldn't have been able to convince him to join them. As for Obito, he was already defeated by Dustless's Tsukuyami. Chapter 115. After all, Yahiko was very similar to Uzumaki Naruto in all aspects, and their personalities were even more similar. Let go of Konan. Seeing his most precious friend die in front of him, Uzumaki Nagato's murderous aura poured out like a storm, making the situation even more terrifying. Let her go. After staring at Yahiko's body for a while, Hanzo the salamander breathed a sigh of relief. He waved his hand, and the two ninjas who were holding Konan looked at each other and immediately released her. But at the same time, their eyes flashed with a cunning and cruel smile. After Yahiko's death, Uzumaki Nagato's eyes were fixed on Konan, and her safety was more important than his own. Although the emotional changes of the two ninjas were very weak, Uzumaki Nagato could see it clearly with his Rinnegan. Get away from Konan! Uzumaki Nagato's roar was like a thunderbolt in Konan's ears. She subconsciously turned her head and saw the two ninjas rushing towards her. She was about to die. What a troublesome little girl! In the distance, Dustless, who was wearing a cloak, slightly lowered the brim of his hat, and his eyes flashed with helplessness. He looked at Konan's panicked face and slowly shook his head. He lifted his 5 fingers and pointed at Konan, and a majestic and irresistible suction force erupted from his hand. Konan's pupils turned white, and her pretty face was filled with a strange sadness. She closed her eyes and waited for her death. Perhaps with Yahiko's death, her heart was filled with despair. She stopped resisting and wanted to accompany Yahiko to the afterlife. The dead are gone, and you are still young. You should look at your future with a long-term vision. The calm, tranquil, and slightly aged voice rang out. Xiaonan suddenly felt that her body was incomparably light and agile. She subconsciously opened her lively and beautiful eyes. She didn't know when, but Conan was floating in the air. This is... Staring blankly at the crowd below, Xiaonan's eyes were filled with astonishment. Soon after, she felt a majestic and irresistible force of absolute gravity behind her. It was like the hand of God, making her unable to move. She suddenly turned her head, her cold eyes fixed on the distant mountain peak, on the thin figure who was isolated from the rest of the world. The young man was wearing a trench coat embroidered with red clouds. He had a mysterious temperament. He wore a bamboo hat with a wind chime on his head, and a spiral-shaped mask on his face. It was impossible to see his face. He opened his hand and casually pointed it at Xiaonan. However, Xiaonan felt as if she was in a god's domain. Her body's various functions were absolutely restricted. She couldn't move, let alone break free. Spirit summoning, heretic demon statue. Seeing Conan safe and sound, and being rescued by a mysterious person wearing a spiral mask, Nagato was relieved, and the heavy burden in his heart disappeared. Yahiko entrusted him with Conan's protection, and even if he died, he couldn't let her be in danger. Ka. The space behind Nagato suddenly cracked, and a giant in the form of a dead tree came out of the void. Its mouth was full of sharp teeth like the teeth of a shark. Ao. A depressing roar came out of the giant's mouth. It seemed that the vortex Nagato's power wasn't strong enough, and the summoned giant faintly shrank back. The Rinnegan surged with ripples and black lines spread out. Staring at Hanzo, Nagato suddenly clapped his hands and immediately shouted, "Pucci!" There was no doubt that the monster was the Geto Mazo. It opened its mouth again, and countless black iron rods shot out from its mouth, like blades inserted into Uzumaki Nagato's body, absorbing his chakra and vitality. Nagato's chakra wasn't enough, so he could only replace it with his own vitality. After a while, Uzumaki Nagato's body shriveled up, leaving only skin and bones. His face was pale and weak. Nagato. Looking at the shriveled body, Conan's watery eyes were full of worry and pain, and at the same time, her body fell to Dustless's side. Look carefully. The scene in front of you is the essence of this cruel world. The body fragrance of the orchid in the empty valley inevitably entered his ears and nose. Behind the mask, Wu Chen's face was a little unnatural, but it was quickly restrained. He whispered to Xiaonan. Ho. Ao. The Geto demon statue roared again. A thick transparent dragon came out of the Geto demon statue's mouth. It was like a wild beast out of its cage, and it roared to the sky. That's... Conan looked at the endless transparent dragon in horror. Looking at the dragon coming out of the Geto Mazo's mouth, her soul trembled. There's nothing to be surprised about. His chakra and strength are limited, and he can't exert the power of the Geto Mazo to the limit. Looking at the transparent dragon roaring in the sky, Dustless's eyes flashed with sarcasm. This monster can scare others, but for him, it's just a piece of cake. The Geto Mazo is the outer shell of the Jubi, and Nagato can only exert 30% of its power. Staring at the surprised Hanzo and the others on the cliff, Dustless's eyes turned quickly, and his body erupted with a strong aura, and a very oppressive aura floated from Dustless's body. After fusing with Hashirama's chakra, Dustless could control the Geto Mazo even without the legendary Rinnegan. Let me control the Geto Mazo. I'll let you guys see the power of the legendary Geto Mazo, even without chakra. It can still destroy the world. Chapter 116. The Geto Mazo used to be the shell of the Jubi. As the body of the Jubi, its power was beyond doubt. Even without chakra, its power should not be underestimated. Uzumaki Nagato was not Madara, and he did not open the Rinnegan, let alone Madara. Even Dustless's control of the Geto Mazo was not comparable to Uzumaki Nagato. A powerful eye power overflowed from Dustless's eyes, and the chakra spear that was spat out from the Geto statue's mouth disappeared. It was sucked back into the Geto statue's mouth. What's going on? Uzumaki Nagato stared blankly at the Geto Mazo Nagato, who had returned to its mouth. His pale face suddenly turned black, and he looked at the numerous black iron rods behind him indignantly. His heart was particularly tangled and depressed. Didn't this mean that all his previous efforts were in vain? Although I don't understand what happened, but it seems that kid's technique failed. In short, that kid's Rinnegan belongs to me this time. Looking at Nagato's shocked face, Hanzo the salamander smiled gloomily. The legendary Rinnegan is a god's eye that is above the Sharingan and Byakugan. It was about to be used by him. Ignorant fool, do you think anyone can use Rinnegan? Dustless, who was wearing the spiral mask, saw the passion in Hanzo's eyes. He sneered again and again, with endless contempt in his voice. Nagato was a descendant of the Six Paths, and the burden of using the Rinnegan was so great. Let alone Hanzo, who had nothing to do with the Sage of the Six Paths. Come out, Geto Golem. Dustless stared at the Geto demon statue that was hidden in the void with only half of its head exposed. His gaze froze, and he raised his strength to the maximum. Ao. Ka. The Geto Golem's angry voice resounded through the clouds, and a powerful shockwave came out of its mouth. The terrifying shockwave caused everyone to retreat. Under everyone's horrified gazes, the Geto Golem's huge hands tore apart the space on both sides. The terrifying power caused the space crack to expand continuously. This feeling, impossible. Could it be that the Geto Golem has already escaped my control? Uzumaki Nagato felt that he had lost contact with the Geto Mazo, and he looked at it in disbelief. Just now, it seemed that some kind of superpower directly cut off his connection with the Geto Mazo. His face was pale, and his Rinnegan flashed with different emotions. Nagato didn't expect that the Geto Mazo, which could only be controlled by the Rinnegan, could be taken away. And looking at the current state of the Geto Mazo, it was obvious that the caster behind it was much stronger than him. In particular, the deafening roar from the Geto Mazo's mouth made Nagato's soul tremble in fear. Ha! As he formed a mudra with both of his hands, a stronger chakra wave was emitted from Dustless's body. The ominous and decaying aura of the demonic statue of Geto became even thicker. What kind of monster is this? Seeing the situation rapidly deteriorating, Hanzo the salamander, who had been quietly watching and planning to seize the opportunity to seize the Rinnegan, his old face turned purple. How was this a failure of the spell casting? It was clearly the Geto Golem receiving an even stronger summon. Could it be him? Suddenly remembering the mysterious black-clothed man who rescued Xiao Nan, Hanzo subconsciously looked over. Although Dustless's mask and hat covered his face, Hanzo could still see the contempt in Dustless's eyes. Uzumaki Nagato also looked at Dustless. The difference was that Dustless gave him a familiar feeling. Ao. Ka. Pung. The Geto Golem roared angrily at the sky once again. Its powerful withered tree arm unleashed its full power, completely tearing apart the space that enveloped its body. Its huge body fell from the sky, causing the entire ground to tremble. A few meters of sand and dust were stirred up, and it immediately exploded. So big! The Geto Golem's dozens of meters tall withered tree body suddenly reflected in the eyes of the world. Everyone unconsciously held their breath, looking at the towering giant in horror. The uneven layers of thick muscles all over its body were particularly terrifying. The ancient aura of decay overflowing from its body was particularly oppressive. The 9 incomparably ferocious eyes were like a demon from hell, and the 10 column-shaped bulges on its back made people involuntarily afraid of this prehistoric creature in front of them. This height is estimated to be comparable to Uchiha Madara's ultimate body. Dustless also saw the Geto Golem for the first time in broad daylight. At the same time, he compared Madara's ultimate body to the Geto Golem in his heart. Are you the one who controls the Geto Golem? Dustless's voice was naturally heard by Konan, and her pretty face changed dramatically. You actually know that it's the Geto Golem. It seems that Uzumaki Nagato told you a lot about the Rinnegan. Dustless turned his head and glanced at Conan in surprise. Then he calmed down and said with a calm tone, Uzumaki Nagato has the Rinnegan, and he does have the ability to control the Ghetto Golem, but he's not the only one. Dustless still remembered that Uchiha Itachi used to control the Ghetto Golem without the Rinnegan. This means that as long as a large number of Hashirama's cells were integrated into the body, he could control the Ghetto Golem even without the Rinnegan. Moreover, his control was more proficient than Uzumaki Nagato with the Rinnegan. Who the hell are you? Seeing that Dustless was omniscient, Conan frowned and asked curiously. Dustless wasn't hostile to her. Conan naturally knew that Dustless wasn't hostile to her, so she didn't guard against him. Who am I? At least for now. I'm your friend, an ally who can drag you from hell to heaven. After saying that, without waiting for Conan to speak, the Ghetto Golem's huge body suddenly fell to the ground with its hands on the ground. 10 pillar-shaped protrusions on its back swept a dazzling silver lightning. Pa, pa, pa! Intense destructive lightning flashed on the back of the demonic statue of Ghetto. Crackling sounds could be heard as a blinding light flashed across the void. It was as if a divine sword had slashed the sky apart. The violent lightning was like a punishment from the heavens. Everything in the world seemed to be on the verge of collapse. Chapter 117. The razor-sharp lightning that could pierce through everything surged out like a tide, covering an area that was unprecedentedly vast and boundless. Almost all the creatures felt a sense of oppression, and a sense of despair involuntarily rose up in their hearts. There was no need to deliberately target, just a simple sweep. What a terrifying range and attack power! His eyes slightly narrowed. Standing on the top of the mountain, Hanzo stared at the silver light on the back of the Ghetto Mazo and took a deep breath. His pupils were filled with uncertainty, and a sense of fear appeared in his heart. And that kid's ability is so strange, his strength is so terrifying, like a pool of stagnant water. I can't see through him. Suddenly looking up, looking at the masked man Dustless who was standing side by side with Conan, Hanzo's heart inevitably sank. The enemy wasn't terrifying, but an enemy like Wu Chun was undoubtedly the most terrifying. His entire body was covered in a mysterious veil. Moreover, his strength was extremely extraordinary. It was as if he had appeared out of thin air. There was no trace that could be found. What a terrifying strength! He can even control a summoned beast that can only be controlled by the Rinnegan. And it seems that he is more proficient than Uzumaki Nagato. Speaking of this, Hanzo the salamander suspected that his brain wasn't big enough. Rinnegan's summoned beast was forcibly snatched away by others. Not to mention that Wuchen was even more proficient in using the Ghetto Mazo. It was really beyond his scope of understanding. Sighing, Hanzo the salamander knew that if he didn't admit defeat this time, he might lose his life here. Although he had the strength of a demigod, Dustless's ability was already in the realm of gods. All troops retreat. Without thinking, Hanzo directly ordered all the ninjas of the Rain Village to retreat. For a cunning person like him, a temporary defeat was nothing. It was just a trivial matter. Anyway, the leader of the Akatsuki, Yahiko, was completely dead. Maybe in the near future, the Akatsuki would fall apart. The Rain ninjas looked at Hanzo, who was the first to leave, and immediately looked at each other, and left one after another. Damned bastard! I will definitely kill you in the future. Turning his head to stare at the masked man Dustless, Hanzo the salamander's hatred for Dustless had reached its peak. He couldn't wait to eat his flesh and drink his blood. In short, even if he dismembered Dustless into 1,000 pieces, it still wouldn't be able to reduce the volcanic eruption of anger in his heart. Without Dustless's interference, maybe the Rinnegan would have already been captured, and the Rain Village under his leadership would have also risen strongly and become a village on the same level as the 5 great ninja villages, or even above them. You still want to run? You actually still want to run in front of me? Looking at the Rain ninja who wanted to escape, Dustless sneered as he understood Hanzo's despicable approach. Except for him, all of you go to hell. With a contemptuous smile on his face, Dustless's pupils suddenly enlarged, and a strong energy fluctuation came out. The lightning behind the ghetto mazo was obviously shining to the extreme. Like a spider web, the lightning erupted out, and the endless void suddenly trembled. Whoosh! The speed of the lightning was naturally extremely fast. Its speed was so fast that it disappeared the moment it appeared. It was far beyond the limit of human vision. And the moment it appeared again, it covered the rain ninja, who was fleeing in panic. Boom, boom, boom! Even without a scream, the rain ninja was directly eroded by the huge silver lightning, and in the blink of an eye, his whole body was swallowed. The ninja who was hit was lying on the ground, motionless. There was no breath of life, and he had stopped breathing. Obviously he was dead. Only Hanzo the salamander was spared. Why didn't you kill him? You should have the ability to kill him. Seeing Hanzo completely disappear, Conan's pretty face turned black, and she stared at Dustless, and the good impression she had for Dustless disappeared. Hanzo the salamander was also in the range of the ghetto mazo's lightning, but he was able to escape unscathed. Obviously Dustless did this deliberately. Hanzo the salamander must be killed by him. Pointing to Uzumaki Nagato, Dustless said indifferently, "Even if I kill Hanzo the salamander, he will live in the shadow of Yahiko's death for the rest of his life, and it must be done by him." Although Uzumaki Nagato would live in the shadow of Yahiko's death, Hanzo the salamander must be killed by him. Otherwise, Dustless was sure that Uzumaki Nagato would never be able to let go of Yahiko's death. Is that so? Conan's eyes flashed, and her eyes were faintly filled with tears, and she looked like she was about to cry. Her whole body was filled with sadness, and her delicate body was as weak as a willow branch, and she fell towards Dustless. Thinking of the twists and turns in the life of Yahiko and the others, the world couldn't help but sigh at the impermanence of the world. And who was the one who caused all of this? This is the essence of this world. The weak are prey to the strong. The so-called bridge to communicate and understand people's hearts is illusory, and it only exists in the world of dreams. Instead of letting the world live in pain, it's better for us to work together and create a country of dreams. Dustless caught Conan, who was falling with the wind, and feeling the warmth from her delicate hands. His mind couldn't help but shake, and he took a deep breath. After stabilizing the strange emotions in his heart, Dustless regained his calm. "Who the hell are you?" Quickly breaking free from Dustless's hand, Conan's face was very unnatural, especially when she felt Dustless's body heat, which made her even more uncomfortable. In order to hide her embarrassment, she looked at Dustless and said coldly, "Akatsuki doesn't need to cooperate with people like you." "Is that so? That's a pity. But what you say doesn't seem to count." With a sigh of pity, Dustless walked towards Uzumaki Nagato. When a person suffers a huge blow, their spirit and emotions will be abnormally weak. And as long as there is a little temptation, Dustless is sure that Uzumaki Nagato will take the bait. Chapter 118. Staring at Nagato's pupils, Dustless breathed a sigh of relief. He was afraid that Nagato would use one of the most powerful forbidden jutsu of the Rinnegan, the Outer Path, reincarnation of the heavens, to resurrect Yahiko. But obviously, he was overthinking, as Nagato probably hadn't mastered this jutsu yet. Otherwise, with Nagato's nature, he would definitely resurrect Yahiko. "Nagato, you!" Conan looked at the numerous black iron rods behind Nagato, and her beautiful eyes flashed with self-blame. If she wasn't caught by Hanzo, Nagato wouldn't be like this, and Yahiko wouldn't have died because of her. "Conan, I'm fine." Uzumaki Nagato shook his head and gave Conan a look of concern, indicating that there was no need to worry. Then his eyes fell on Dustless. His eyes rippled, and he immediately lowered his head as if he was thinking about something. Nagato wasn't stupid, and he knew that he and Dustless weren't in the same dimension. Especially when he saved Conan, he knew that Dustless wasn't hostile to them. People will always die. Feeling the deep sadness oozing from Conan and Uzumaki Nagato, he seemed to be affected as well, and Dustless couldn't speak directly. Everything rises and falls because of fate. Even if Yahiko died, he didn't want to see you like this, just like this rain, just like his crying. Suddenly, the rain poured down, as if venting its dissatisfaction, mercilessly raging on the earth. Dustless's body emitted a faint halo, covering the three of them, and quietly looking at the world in the rain, the atmosphere was particularly oppressive. I won't inherit Yahiko's will. Yahiko, he was wrong. After a moment of silence, Nagato's face suddenly became ferocious, and his eyes emitted a cold light, giving the feeling that he had fallen into the devil's path, and his whole body was cold and isolated from the world. No matter who, in the face of the death of their loved one, would have a great change of heart. Just like Nagato now, it was because of Yahiko's death that he saw the world more clearly, and looked at it with an unprecedented vision. Why do you say that? Hearing this, Dustless asked with a deadpan expression, and the corner of his mouth raised into a smile, but it couldn't be seen because of the mask. The bridge to everyone's heart doesn't exist. With a cold sneer on his face, Nagato's murderous intent spread out like a tide, and the rain that was close to Dustless and the others took a detour. People who don't understand the pain of war, and war can't understand the preciousness of peace like us. For those who have never experienced pain, war only exists in their imagination's imagination. Only pain can make them understand the preciousness of peace, and piously pray for peace to come. In other words, only those who know of pain know of peace, Nagato said in a heavy tone, with an unprecedented determination. Yahiko's death could be said to have changed his temperament, giving him a new goal in life. Nonsense. Looking at Nagato, who seemed to have come back from the dead, Dustless sneered. The so-called peace didn't matter to Dustless, but Nagato didn't have the right to give pain to the world, nor did he have the qualification to do so. However, Uzumaki Nagato's current situation was exactly as Madara had planned. So, what's your next goal? Using Rinnegan to destroy the world or? Looking at Akatsuki's uniform, Dustless said meaningfully. Hearing Dustless's words, Nagato's Rinnegan surged with a cold luster. I must establish a huge organization, one that covers the whole world. Nagato's eyes were full of light, and his tone was resolute and irrefutable. A huge plan quickly took shape in his heart, and he already had a basic outline. Yahiko's establishment of the Akatsuki was his greatest legacy. Of course, all the ordinary ninjas were completely eliminated. After this battle, Uzumaki Nagato understood that in the face of absolute power, numbers didn't matter at all, just like Dustless did before. Seeing Nagato's face full of determination, Dustless was relieved. He was really afraid that his words weren't as good as Obito's, and he couldn't fool Nagato. It seems that he was thinking too much. Time flew by like a white steed, unknowingly passing by extremely quickly. During this period, a lot of major events happened. The most sensational event was the end of the Battle of Kanushi Bridge, which ended with the victory of Konoha's ninja, led by Minato. The Rock Village surrendered, which also marked Konoha's victory. Minato was also promoted to the position of the fourth Hokage, which was a joyous occasion for him. The one who couldn't accept it the most was Obito. He even knew that after Minato became the Hokage, his other body that was slowly repairing and fusing with his body cracked again, due to his violent rage. Obito believed that everything that Minato had today was because of Rin's death. The reconstruction of the Akatsuki was also progressing in an orderly manner. All the former S-class ninjas were plundered by Dustless, but they weren't complete yet. Those who disobeyed Nagato's orders were all subdued by Tendo Pain's power. Akatsuki, this is the real establishment. In the warm pool, Dustless leaned on the side, leisurely closed his eyes, and enjoyed the service of the beautiful woman behind him. Her silver hair was spotless and flowed down like a waterfall. Her impressive figure was curvaceous, and half of her breasts were covered. Perhaps it was because she was twisting too much. There were even some pink cherry blossoms that could be seen. She was the one who scrubbed Dustless's back. I said, be gentle, this is human skin, not iron skin. Feeling the stinging pain on his back, Dustless was speechless and shouted angrily. He just wanted to relax in the bath, but he didn't expect Otsutsuki to suddenly attack him. Dustless didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Chapter 119. Otsutsuki Haguro looked at Wuchin's smooth back with dissatisfaction. His expression was fierce. This kid came to Earth only to carry out Madara's so-called Eye of the Moon plan. But he didn't care about her at all. How could she not be angry? Her jade-like hand touched the tender flesh of Dustless's waist, and immediately made a 360-degree turn without mercy. Ouch! It hurts, are you crazy? The piercing pain spread all over his nerves. Dustless turned his head angrily, and glared at Otsutsuki Haguro. Looking at her white and delicate face, he knew that this tigress was not looking for him with good intentions. Otsutsuki Haguro looked coldly at the angry Dustless, and said without showing any weakness, "Have you forgotten what you promised me on the moon? Now your actions are just putting your so-called plan into effect." At the end of her words, Otsutsuki Haguro looked at Dustless with fire in her eyes, and her pretty face condensed into ice. This guy not only has no intention of marrying her, but also plays all day long. Especially recently, he has been very close to Conan in the Akatsuki. Dustless's anger disappeared in an instant, and his face began to become unnatural. Otsutsuki Haguro sincerely helped Dustless, but this woman's unrealistic idea really made Dustless quite entangled. Dustless naturally understood Otsutsuki Haguro's idea. She wanted to use him to create a new Otsutsuki family. How can I let you succeed? Wu Chen's brain cells spun intensely. His eyes suddenly lit up, and he came up with a plan. He smiled and said, "I'm still young now. You should let me grow up for a few more years. How can my skinny arms and legs withstand your oppression?" The age gap was too big. Although a few years have passed, Dustless was still young, and Otsutsuki Haguro was already more than 20 years old. Of course, this was also an excuse for Dustless. Although he was still young, his physique was unusually strong due to regular exercise, and his physical ability in all aspects of his body was naturally not bad. The reason why he said so was to perfunctory. Splash! Otsutsuki Haguro jumped into the pool and walked gracefully in front of Dustless. Her phoenix-like eyes looked at Dustless, and she frowned and asked, "Not small, I have seen it. Obviously not small." After that, Otsutsuki Haguro looked at Dustless's body with a puzzled face. King. Seeing this, Dustless's mouth twitched fiercely, and black lines hung on his forehead. His lungs churned, and blood almost burst out of his mouth. "I didn't mean that. Our age gap is too big. You have to let me grow up for a few more years." Otsutsuki Haguro's eyes. Haguro's eyes. Otsutsuki Haguro's Haguro's eyes. Dustless's was really afraid he was really out of her. Out. Was Haguro. Dustless Haguro, that's right. Hearing this, Otsutsuki Haguro suddenly froze. Only then did she realize that although Dustless was taller than her, the age gap between the two was still quite big. But that's not important. Haguro blinked, biting her jade finger, and said very seriously, "Those daimyo's children start when they are 11 or 12 years old." Stop. Dustless's mouth twitched again. He looked at Haguro, and said sarcastically, "You even investigated this kind of thing. Is there a need to investigate this? This is a well-known thing." Haguro rolled her eyes, and looked at Dustless contemptuously. The children of ordinary families began to take on the responsibility of carrying on the family line at the age of 15 or 16 years old. Even the only son of some big families had prepared a wife in advance to strengthen the family line. You perfunctory all day long. Do you take my affairs to heart? Seeing Dustless just bowing his head in silence, Haguro's face changed slightly, and her tone was no longer as harsh as before. Opening his mouth, Dustless, who wanted to refuse Otsutsuki Yuro, took back his words. He looked up and saw some tears in Otsutsuki Yuro's eyes. "After a month, I promise to give you a satisfactory answer." Dustless pulled Otsutsuki into his arms and gently patted his shoulder. His action was unprecedentedly bold. His lips pressed against Otsutsuki's, and his little hands began to move restlessly. The deep blue starry sky stretched as far as the eye could see. It was beautiful beyond compare. Countless specks of light adorned the starry sky, making it seem like a mythical world. The fresh and refined air made one feel refreshed. It was the world inside the system. Dustless looked at Ling, who was standing in the distance like a goddess above the 9 heavens. His lips twitched slightly, and ripples appeared in his eyes. Who are you going to train with this time? Ling's emotionless tone drifted out of her mouth. She always maintained an unchanging indifference. She never had any emotional fluctuations. Combined with the girl's natural beauty, this was the only flaw. Of course it's Brother Uchiha. Wuchen said carelessly. His tone was full of confidence. The characters that were trained by the system were at their peak, which meant that Juzi would be at his most powerful period. Uchiha. Hearing this, Linger was stunned. Apparently, she didn't know who Uchiha was. She looked at Dustless in confusion. Of course it's Uchiha Sasuke's long-out yin. Dustless said with dissatisfaction. To be honest, he didn't like Uchiha Sasuke at all. He was even a little disgusted. However, as the saying goes, persimmons are easy to pinch. Although Dustless wanted to train with Uchiha Madara, this training was different. It was a training with his life on the line. If he lost, he couldn't start again. Moreover, the system's characters were at their strongest when they were alive, which meant that Dustless might face the Jubi's Jinchuriki, Uchiha Madara. Although Dustless was conceited, he wasn't sure if he could face Uchiha Madara alone. After all, he was gambling with his life. Failure meant complete death. Naturally, he could only start with Uchiha Madara. Chapter 120. After all, the gap between Uchiha Sasuke and Uchiha Madara is obvious to all. And this kid has something that Dustless values the most. Indra's reincarnation identity. Although Uchiha Madara also has it in comparison, Dustless chose the weaker Sasuke. In that case, as you wish, but this time is different from the past. Once you lose, you will be completely obliterated. I don't need to say this. Ling's heavenly voice rang out once again. It was still like an ancient well without any ripples, without any human emotions. It was as if it had been programmed in advance, filled with killing intent. Once I step out, I will never regret it. Even if the corpse in front of me falls into the sea of blood, my heart will not change. Come at me. The corner of his mouth slightly raised. Dustless's handsome face showed a wild and unruly smile, and the vast chakra broke out like a vast ocean. The golden chakra rendered the entire sky, and all the endless sky was dyed golden. Under Dustless's indifferent annotation, Linger's whole body suddenly changed, and he became a handsome young man who looked like Dustless. The young man had sharp edges and corners. His face was handsome and clean as if it was carved by a knife. His white skin was like ice and snow. His messy hair danced with the wind. He was even more unruly. The piercingly cold killing intent and decisiveness between his brows were quite similar to Wu Chen's. His temperament was cold and unapproachable. It was Uchiha Sasuke. 6 Tomo Rinnegan and Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. If I'm not careful, I may really fall. Staring at the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan of Sasuke's single eye, and the obvious 6 Tomo Rinnegan, Dustless felt the extremely powerful dark eye power in it, and he thought very seriously. Although Dustless didn't like Uchiha Sasuke, he had to admit that Uchiha Sasuke's strength was almost invincible after defeating Otsutsuki Kagaya. How troublesome. Looking at the indifferent Uchiha Sasuke, Dustless smiled faintly, and his left and right eyes turned sharply at the same time. His left eye turned into a scarlet Mangekyo, and his right eye turned into a blue Tensigan. A great battle was about to break out. With the eruption of Dustless's chakra, Linger, who transformed into Uchiha Sasuke, wasn't afraid at all. A similarly terrifying and majestic chakra burst out. It wasn't inferior to Dustless's, and because of the gift from Hagoromo Otsutsuki, the amount of chakra was more than Dustless's. Ka. The competition of the two men's momentum blew the flowing air away, forming a large vacuum area. Especially in the area with Wuchen and Uchiha Sasuke as the center, almost everything was completely crushed and annihilated. Puchi, the sound of cloth tearing sounded, and the sharp-eyed people could see that there were some slight cracks in the corner of Wuchen's clothes. Of course, Uchiha Sasuke was the same, and some of his clothes burst open and fell to the ground. This guy is quite capable. Looking at the snow-like white clothes falling on the ground, Dustless was slightly stunned, and his eyes were full of surprise. When he was about to look up, a black shadow suddenly covered him. Looking up, it was Uchiha Sasuke with a cold face and a shiny katana. Whoosh! A cold light flashed through the void, and the sharp katana rushed down, trying to split Dustless's body into two. So fast. No, that shouldn't be speed. It should be some kind of jutsu. At the critical moment, Dustless quickly elementalized to get rid of the fatal blow, and immediately pulled a distance away from Uchiha Sasuke. Looking at the fragments on the ground, his brows slightly wrinkled, and he quickly understood. This is the ability of his 6th Tomo Rinnegan. It seems to be called Heavenly Hand Power. It seems to be a space ninjutsu. Recalling the ability of Uchiha Sasuke's Rinnegan in his previous life, Dustless's heart quickly relaxed. This jutsu allows the caster and the target to exchange positions in a specific range in an instant, which can avoid the enemy's attack, and can also form an attack on the enemy by exchanging himself and other objects. Just now, Uchiha Sasuke and the fragments of his clothes were obviously exchanged. I really can't be careless. His heart sank slightly. Dustless's eyes were a little hazy and heavy. Uchiha Sasuke in the later stage is definitely one of the most powerful characters. Amaterasu. Staring at Dustless, Uchiha Sasuke suddenly burst out. Bright red blood stains flowed out of his pupils, and immediately saw black flames burning Dustless's body, roasting Dustless's body. You want to burn me with a mere ghost fire? Naive. Looking at the black flames burning on his body, Dustless suddenly sneered. The Tensigen in his right eye twisted sharply, and his body instantly became like a black hole in the depths of the universe, swallowing Amaterasu in an instant. As for Dustless, naturally he was intact. But it's really powerful. 6 Tomo Rinnegan. Looking at Ling, transformed into Uchiha Sasuke, Dustless wasn't stingy with his praise. As for the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, Dustless directly ignored it. For now, it's the same with or without the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan. Although it can help him increase a lot of strength, it doesn't have much effect. All in all, for Dustless who now has the Tensigen and Manjikyu Sharingan, it's like a chicken bone, tasteless to eat, but a pity to throw it away. Even now, Dustless only has the Manjikyu Sharingan. After fusing with Hashirama's cells, it's not much different from the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan. You're not bad. Uchiha Sasuke saw that Dustless could easily resolve his 2 attacks, and was also surprised by Dustless's strength, but soon his face changed, and he stared at Dustless and said coldly, "You are indeed strong, but compared to me, you are still too far away." Hearing this, Dustless's mouth twitched fiercely, and the corners of his mouth lifted into a wry smile, thinking that this guy is really famous for pretending to be weak. Chapter 121. Uchiha Sasuke can be said to be blessed by the heavens. He should be glad that he has such a meticulous brother like Uchiha Itachi. Everything that Uchiha Sasuke has was obtained by stepping on Uchiha Itachi's corpse. Without Uchiha Itachi, he might have become blind. Naturally, Uchiha Sasuke also inherited everything from Itachi, whether in Genjutsu or other aspects. It's my turn to fight back. Dustless's eyes suddenly condensed cold light, and his pupils enlarged. Ordinary ninjutsu is useless against Rinnegan. Ordinary S-class ninjutsu like Amaterasu is almost useless in front of Rinnegan, and it can be easily absorbed by Rinnegan. If you want to use it, you have to use the unexpected. Tensigen Chakra Mode. Dustless's body suddenly swept up the green chakra coat, and Dustless's body was wrapped tightly, and many green prayer beads floated behind him. The feeling he gave off was like the difference between heaven and earth. This is. Ling transformed into Uchiha Sasuke and looked at Dustless, who was wrapped in green chakra. Naturally, he has never seen the legendary Tensigen, especially the green eyes floating behind Dustless, which made him feel quite familiar. Those strange beads floating around seemed similar to the truth-seeking ball. Although Uchiha Sasuke is arrogant and unruly, he is also a careful and calm person. Under the 6 Tomo Rinnegan state, he naturally knows that the green prayer beads are the power of yin and yang, In other words, it's actually another form of the power of 6 paths. This eye is called Tensigen, and it's the eye of the descendant of Otsutsuki Hamura, the younger brother of Rakuto Sannin. The conditions for the birth of this eye are also extremely harsh. Tensigen is the same as Rinnegan. Pointing to the Tensigen in his right eye, Dustless smiled slightly and deliberately explained it to his future third brother. Tensigen? Hearing this, Uchiha Sasuke frowned slightly. He really didn't know what Tensigen was, and he has never seen it. But Otsutsuki Hamura is the younger brother of Rakuto Sannin, and his eyes are on the same level as Rinnegan. I'll show you now. After saying that, Dustless suddenly waved his hand, and the green prayer beads behind him suddenly gathered in front of him, forming a small disc that was faintly filled with a strong storm. Silver Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. Dustless shot out a giant whirlwind from his hand. The raging whirlwind absorbed everything in its path and devoured it to perfect itself, constantly expanding its size. When it got close to Uchiha Sasuke, it was a behemoth hundreds of meters long, and the area affected was almost several miles. What terrifying power! Linger's Uchiha Sasuke's eyes flashed with surprise as he stared at the 100-meter-long bijou. He felt the power of the bijou, and the hurricane that wanted to tear him into pieces. His surprise quickly turned into a dignified and resolute expression. The evil chakra's body instantly soared several dozen feet into the air. The huge body covered the sky, the purple giant's head reached the sky, and its feet stepped on the ground. It was mighty and unyielding, with wings on its back, holding 2 long swords in its hands, and wearing the terrible Tengu armor. It was extremely visually shocking. It was Uchiha Sasuke's ultimate body, Kinsusanoo. Bang bang bang. Kinsusanoo's feet moved, and the ground suddenly began to shake, interpreting the power and destruction to the limit. Every time Kinsusanoo took a step, the ground trembled with it. Even the air showed an unprecedented state of restraint due to the decadent and ancient temperament of Kinsusanoo. The sky was so small, and the earth was so unbearable. It's useless. With a disdainful smile, Uchiha Sasuke looked at the oncoming giant whirlwind, and his face was full of endless sarcasm, and immediately controlled the ultimate body, Kinsusanoo's huge body. The 2 ancient swords in his hands were raised high, and mercilessly roared down. Boom! The huge purple slash suddenly blasted out, erasing everything that came into contact with it along the way, and the ground was instantly pulled into a long and thick crack, and it went straight toward the whirlwind. Puchi! The sharp air wave directly scattered the 100-meter-long whirlwind, and the purple light easily penetrated it, and the air wave swept toward Dustless. The situation was rapidly deteriorating, and Dustless was going to die here. I underestimated you, kid. Murderous aura surged between his eyebrows. Wu Chen's eyes shot out a monstrous killing intent. His body turned into thousands of rays of light, illuminating everything in the world. He used the glint fruit to directly ignore the attack of Uchiha Sasuke's ultimate body, Kinsusanoo. What a tricky ability. Seeing that Dustless easily ignored Kinsusanoo's attack, Uchiha Sasuke raised his eyebrows slightly, and then looked at Dustless, who turned into a rainbow light and swept straight toward the sky. Uchiha Sasuke, who was in the ultimate body, Kinsusanoo, was extremely calm, holding his hands in front of him calm and collected. There was a sense of loneliness at the top. As expected of a master of disguise, I really can't compare with him. Dustless in the sky naturally saw the change in Uchiha Sasuke's demeanor, and the corners of his mouth also raised uncontrollably with a playful smile, thinking that Uchiha Sasuke deserved to be the second protagonist. Dustless can only look up to this fearless spirit. Idiot, you think the ultimate body Kinsusanoo is invincible? Ridiculous. Looking contemptuously at Kinsusanoo's extraordinary body, Dustless shook his head helplessly. The ultimate body Kinsusanoo can scare ordinary people, such as the late stage 5 Kage. But for Dustless, it's just a giant target. In other words, Uchiha Sasuke is an absolute target in a giant coffin. Chakra burst out of his body, and a huge aura of life overflowed from his body. Dustless crossed his arms, and the palms of his hands shone with a dazzling golden light, covering a vast and infinite range. His pupils suddenly opened, and a murderous aura roared out. Senjutsu, Yasakani no Magatama. Chapter 122. Light bullets rained down from the sky, unscrupulously roaring in the sky. The dense number of light bullets couldn't be captured at all, like a rainstorm changing the entire sky. The sky was dyed in a gorgeous golden color. Looking up, one could only see the endless flashes pouring down. In this case, it's difficult to find a place to not be covered, let alone escape unscathed. Good. Dense number. Looking up at the sky, Linger transformed into Uchiha Sasuke. After being sluggish for a long time, smacked his lips and muttered in disbelief, secretly smacking his lips. Looking at the dense number of raindrops, Susanu's huge body has indeed become the most suitable target. But even so, Uchiha Sasuke couldn't withdraw Kinsusanu. He could only rely on it to resist. Otherwise, the person who will be beaten into a sieve and be miserably dismembered may be himself. In such an environment, the ultimate body Kinsusanu can only resist. Uchiha Sasuke was not a fool. He immediately blocked Kinsusanu's arms in front of him, especially Kinsusanu's forehead. After all, he was in this position. Bang bang bang. Kinsusanu, bathed in the golden light bullets, became the target of devastation. The heavy armor on his body was constantly peeled off layer by layer, and his huge body was forcibly pushed back by the terrifying force. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Although Kinsusanu withstood a lot of light bullets, because the coverage of the light group was too large, it was inevitable that some would leak, and the ground became the target of slaughter. Looking around, there were countless holes in the ground, the size of a fist, like a bee's nest. There were holes everywhere, and they were connected to each other, showing how thoroughly destroyed it was. Damn it, hold on for me. Seeing Kinsusanu's outer armor, even his skin, and the meridians in his body were quickly peeled off layer by layer, Uchiha Sasuke's eyes flashed with unprecedented madness, and the evil purple chakra on his body rose again, constantly recasting and consolidating, repairing Kinsusanu's body, trying to delay the destruction of the golden light. In this way, he would be safe and sound. This kid is pretty good. Kinsusanu's damaged body was constantly repaired, resisting the erosion of the golden light. As time passed, the golden light bullets were no longer as dense as before, and the biting cold offensive gradually weakened. Until now, it completely stopped. Kinsusanu's body was destroyed many times during this period, but Uchiha Sasuke used the terrifying chakra to restore it. What a monster! That kind of chakra consumption, I'm afraid I can't use it that many times. Suddenly recalling Kinsusanu's body that was constantly destroyed and repaired, Dustless was speechless. He was worthy of being the one who received the gift of the six paths, and also the reincarnation of Indra. He was far superior in all aspects. If this is your unique skill, I'm sorry to tell you, then today you will die. In the restored Kinsusanu, Uchiha Sasuke coldly looked at Dustless, and the murderous intent in his eyes shot straight at Dustless like a blade. With your level, you talk big, but I'm afraid you don't have the teeth to do it. Are all the children of the concubines so arrogant nowadays? Turning a deaf ear to Uchiha Sasuke's words, Dustless looked at Uchiha Sasuke faintly, and then with a provocative face, he pointed his finger at him, signaling Uchiha Sasuke to come at him. Reckless thing. Since you want to die so much, I'll help you. Seeing this, Uchiha Sasuke's face suddenly condensed into ice, and his murderous intent was revealed. Kinsusanu's body suddenly shook, and immediately, countless black runes poured into Kinsusanu's body, densely packed like ants, almost covering Kinsusanu's entire body. Glancing proudly at Dustless, Uchiha Sasuke suddenly shouted, and the cold tone made the temperature drop a lot, full of endless oppression. Senjutsu, Kinsusanu. Ayo, ayo, ayo. As if it was given life, a ferocious roar came out of Kinsusanu's mouth, and the roar spread like a shock wave, and the ripples could be clearly seen in the endless void. As expected, the system's ability is truly heaven-defying and terrifying. This damned sparring. Heavily exhaling a mouthful of turbid air, Wu Chen's eyes then heavily looked at Susanoo, which was covered with black veins all over its body, and the terrible thought in his heart was absolutely confirmed. As everyone knows, Uchiha Sasuke can't use the Senjutsu chakra at all, and the later Senjutsu, Kinsusanoo, is the Senjutsu Kekkai Genkai after absorbing Yugo's chakra. Uchiha Sasuke himself didn't have this ability, but now he can use this jutsu, which means that all the characters in the system have retained their greatest strength when they were alive. Even if it's not their unique moves, even if it's a combination of moves, now it can be used without limit. In other words, even if Uchiha Sasuke summons the Kyuubi that doesn't belong to him now, he can also use it on Kinsusanoo. Damn system. Dustless could only fiercely curse in his heart. This undoubtedly means that Uchiha Sasuke can now use 6 paths, Chibaku Tensei, and Indra's arrow alone, whether it's a combination or not. As long as Uchiha Sasuke has used ninjutsu before, he can use it now. Bastard, what a blunder. Dustless's face was pale, and his whole body was cold. If it's really as he thought, maybe the one who will be crushed will be himself. I can only give it a try. The hesitation in his eyes was quickly replaced by madness. Dustless obviously intended to fight Uchiha Sasuke to the death, and his whole body was full of spirit. Chapter 123. Thinking quickly, Dustless's eyes flashed with a strange light. Thinking about it carefully, it's not like he has no chance of winning. Compared to Sasuke, who knows everything about his abilities, Kinsusanoo doesn't know anything about his abilities, so he can have an unexpected effect. Uchiha Sasuke, you will be the first person to see me use the Tenseigan with all my strength. The green light that wrapped Dustless's whole body became stronger, even stronger than Otsutsuki Hagoromo on the moon. Pretentious, I'll tear off your clothes now. Langer transformed into Uchiha Sasuke and smiled contemptuously. Ultimate Susanoo suddenly flashed a purple bow, and at the same time, he pulled the bow with all his strength, and an extremely sharp arrow whizzed towards his face. Idiot! Raising his eyelids, his eyes were calm, indifferent and calm, without any emotional fluctuations, and the world in his pupils was like stagnant water without vitality. Looking up, he saw Dustless indifferently raising his tender and slender right arm, and the palm of his right hand emitted a brilliant golden light, and immediately slashed forward. Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. The golden light in Dustless's palm stretched for hundreds of meters in an instant, and Kinsusanoo's arrow was broken, and the straight light stretched without limit, sweeping toward Madara and Kinsusanoo. Pucci! This epic scene was unforgettable. The golden ray of light swept across, and the moment it came into contact with the Senjutsu, Susanoo, it directly penetrated it, and the golden light passed through its body. Faintly, one could see that Kinsusanoo's neck was casually cut, and the incision was dotted with golden light, and it didn't dissipate for a long time, as if it was permanently imprinted on it, and it couldn't be erased. Kacha! Kinsusanoo's huge body and head were directly cut in two. It's a pity that the distance is too far, and I can't completely control it. Otherwise, that kid would have been directly crushed like Kinsusanoo. Helplessly shaking his head, Dustless sighed with disappointment, and his eyes were full of pity. Maybe if he moved a little more, Kinsusanoo's body would have been cut. Compared to Dustless, who was full of disappointment, Uchiha Sasuke was stunned, and he turned his head and stared at Dustless in horror. He never felt that death was so close to him. Damn kid, don't show off. Seeing that Uchiha Sasuke was still in shock, with cold sweat on his forehead, and even the hair on his temples was sweaty, Dustless suddenly felt happy, and his face was flushed, and he was full of energy. According to Dustless's personal guess, Tenseigan is more inclined to attack, such as powerful moves like Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion, while Rinnegan is more inclined to seal, such as super powerful seals like Chibaku Tensei. Of course, Rinnegan still varies according to the individual's ability. In addition, Otsutsuki Kagaya's 9-tomo Rinnegan, which is the legendary Rinnegan Sharingan, is also a special case. In short, there is nothing absolute in the world. One thing is certain, Tenseigan and Rinnegan have their own strengths and weaknesses, and they work together perfectly. It's really the perfect combination. And it also makes him more determined to defeat Uchiha Sasuke, take everything from him, and open his own Rinnegan. That move just now must be the so-called Tensegan Jutsu. It's really not an ordinary eye. Staring at Dustless's right eye, Uchiha Sasuke thought calmly thinking about countermeasures. There was only a single color in his eyes, and only absolute reason. Let's test you with this move. The black energy ball formed by high-density chakra slowly flew from Uchiha Sasuke's hand to the sky. The dark ball's surface was covered with dark golden light, shrouded in unprecedented gravity, and the whole ground began to buzz and tremble. The ground trembled, like the organs in the human body, and it began to squirm. Chibaku Tensei, Amaterasu, boom! In the endless void, the mysterious black ball was suddenly swallowed by the black ghost fire, and then violently exploded. A huge mushroom cloud swept across the distant sky, and the black smoke didn't dissipate for a long time. Bastard! Seeing this, Uchiha Sasuke roared angrily, and his voice was like thunder. His painstaking plan was instantly seen through by Dustless. How could he not be angry? You're angry over such a trivial matter. Looking at Uchiha Sasuke, Dustless immediately smiled and said, "Or are you saying that you have exhausted your talents? This is the best. I can also save some effort. After all, this is the same as the real world. If I get injured, I will also get injured in the real world. You're dreaming." Glancing at Dustless, Uchiha Sasuke sneered again and again, and a cold demonic smile appeared on his face. 1, 2, or even 3 Chibaku Tensei, you may be able to destroy them, but if this number is doubled, and it becomes 9, I'll see what you can do. At the end of his words, Uchiha Sasuke's expression suddenly changed, and his 6 Tomo Rinne eyes flashed with a thick murderous aura. His whole body was like a flood dam, and chakra was erupting freely. Chibaku Tensei. Boom, boom, boom. 9 black balls floated to the sky, and 6 black flames rose in the void. Although Dustless destroyed 6 balls in the first place, there were still 3 Chibaku Tensei that successfully avoided Dustless's attack. Kakaka! The 3 high-density black chakra balls suddenly erupted with a strong gravitational force, and the solid ground suddenly collapsed like a piece of paper, exposing the soil in the depths of the ground to the light of the eyes. As far as the eye could see, countless giant mountains were rushing toward the 3 black spheres in the sky, completely ignoring gravity. Chapter 124. As the most powerful seal of Rinnegan, Chibaku Tensei's power is beyond doubt, and Uchiha Sasuke, who has 6 Tomo Rinnegan, is able to exert the power of Chibaku Tensei to the fullest. In the blink of an eye, the world will collapse, the sun and the moon will become colorless, playing the meaning of the word destruction to the limit. The powerful eye power is far stronger than Uzumaki Nagato. Uchiha Sasuke can launch 9 Chibaku Tensei at once, and he's still strong. If it's Uzumaki Nagato, maybe he will die because of chakra. Where does this guy get his confidence? Following Uchiha Sasuke's gaze, he saw that Dustless's body was also attracted by the gravitational force of Chibaku Tensei, and his body began to slowly float up. However, what puzzled Uchiha Sasuke was that Dustless looked calm. Seeing that he was about to be swallowed by Chibaku Tensei, he didn't show the slightest fear. His temperament was steady and calm, which made Uchiha Sasuke frown slightly. Pretentious. After thinking for a while, Uchiha Sasuke's eyes condensed cold light, and then he just snorted, and then looked at Dustless with a cold expression, and chose to be silent. He looked at Dustless with an indifferent expression. I want to see what means you have to face the attack of 3 Chibaku Tensei and swim safely. Staring at Dustless, Uchiha Sasuke's eyes were in a trance, and then he quickly recovered his calmness, whispering to himself. Wu Chen's expression was rather calm. There was even a faint smile on his face, giving people the feeling of being bathed in the spring breeze. Especially the gentle and pleasant smile at the corners of his mouth. It was completely opposite to his usual murderous and cold style. It's worthy of the jutsu that can seal Otsutsuki Kagaya later. Looking up slightly, looking at the black beads above his head full of endless gravity, Dustless couldn't help but sigh. Although this can't be compared to the scale of Rakuto, Chibaku Tensei, the gravitational force on it is enough to easily overturn everything. As far as the eye could see, the horizon had changed. But this kind of thing can't get rid of me. Staring at the terrifying black sphere, Dustless's lips curled into a cold smile. The materialized evil chakra gushed out and covered Dustless's body. Kinsisanu, holding the katana of light, suddenly appeared and covered Dustless's body. The materialized giant was wearing the Tengu armor. Even though it wasn't as huge as Sasuke's ultimate body, in terms of momentum, it wasn't weaker than Sasuke's ultimate body. Explode! As Dustless's voice fell, Kinsisanu's katana of light slashed towards the Chibaku Tensei. The entire horizon suddenly trembled, and a blazing wave of fire burst out, and an incomparably hot wave of air swept out like a wave. Is that his Kinsisanu? How is that possible? How can a mature Kinsisanu be so big? Seeing that the Chibaku Tensei was destroyed by Dustless's Kinsisanu, Ling, transformed into Uchiha Sasuke, didn't care much. He also thought that this trick couldn't get rid of Dustless. But what surprised him was that the mature Kinsisanu's physique was really scary. It was just a little shorter than his ultimate body Kinsisanu. There are still 2 left. Staring at the remaining 2 Chibaku Tensei still filled with irresistible gravity, Dustless and Kinsisanu raised his eyebrows slightly, and then his body rushed forward. The katana of light was ready to be used, and swept out. Boom! 2 golden airwaves suddenly shot out from the long blade. The sharp whistling sound made people's ears hurt. The golden luster cut through the thistles and thorns like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. It easily destroyed the 2 Chibaku heavenly stars. At a glance, there were only 3 blazing fires in the blue sky. It seems that your Rinnegan is just Esuzu. Looking at Uchiha Sasuke's face, Dustless chuckled leisurely, and his Tensigen rippled faintly and said faintly, Rinnegan is just SO. I hope I can still be so leisurely and calm after this. Suppressing the burning anger in his heart, Uchiha Sasuke could be said to be burning with anger. Even if he hid it well, anyone could see his anger, and immediately said to Dustless in a cold voice, If you want to destroy him, first make him crazy. Seeing this, Dustless laughed in his heart. Uchiha Sasuke's temper is quite impulsive, and now he saw that the strongest seal of Rinnegan was easily broken by him. For the extremely arrogant and conceited Uchiha Sasuke, Dustless's move has completely angered him, and now it's completely adding fuel to the fire. The characters in the system are almost exactly the same as in the real world. Whether it's personality or strength, there is no change. This kid's eye of reincarnation is really strong. Although Dustless showed that Uchiha Sasuke was extremely disdainful, he had to admit that Uchiha Sasuke's 6-tomo Rinnegan is indeed great, and he can launch 9 consecutive Chibaku Tensei in the state of one eye at the same time. Whoosh! The sound of the air breaking sounded, and the blazing fire could be felt from far away. Looking up, the scene reflected in his eyes was a black arrow whistling through the air, flashing with a dark light, revealing a blazing fire that could devour everything. And its power was very powerful. This is the ability of his eternal Mangekyo. It seems that he can control Amaterasu's mentality, and turn Amaterasu into any form according to his will. Frowning slightly, Wu Chen stared at the black arrow flying towards him. He was not afraid at all. He gently raised his right arm, opened his 5 fingers, and shot out a repulsive force towards Amaterasu's black arrow. Boom! The black arrow formed by Amaterasu suddenly burst and fell to the ground like raindrops. Not to mention hurting Dustless, it was extremely difficult to get close to him. Chapter 125. Dustless only got the Tensigen a short time ago, and just like Sasuke's Rinnegan, it's also a monocular state. However, Dustless has long been familiar with the flexible application of the Tensigen, and most of its abilities have been completely and perfectly mastered. Now, it's just the basic ability of controlling the repulsion force. Dustless naturally has no problem, and he easily scattered the Amaterasu into countless black dots. Tensigen. both offensive and defensive, and its pure attack power is even stronger than Rinnegan. Gazing at the scattered Amaterasu, the surprise in Sasuke's eyes disappeared, and he calmed down and looked at Dustless solemnly. I've played enough. In fact, it's just a matter of a moment to deal with you. Looking at Dustless's face without a smile, Sasuke's indifferent tone suddenly changed, and he looked at Dustless with an extremely serious expression. The confidence he showed made Dustless stunned, as if he was sure that he could defeat him. Don't talk nonsense. If you have the ability, just do it. Frowning, Dustless waved his hand impatiently and said with a displeased expression, indicating Sasuke to do it. No matter what ninjutsu in this world, there are weaknesses. Even my Rinnegan is no exception. Ignoring Dustless's impatience, Sasuke said to himself, the so-called ninjutsu have unknown weaknesses and loopholes. My Rinnegan is no exception, and your so-called Tenseigan is no exception. Looking at Wuchin's Tenseigan, Uchiha Sasuke, who was usually silent, was extraordinarily talkative at this moment, and continued, I can see that your Tenseigan belongs to the type that is extremely powerful in physical attack. What do you want to say? Slightly frowning, Wu Chen's handsome face remained calm and asked indifferently. He always felt that Uchiha Sasuke's tone was insinuating, with a different meaning. In other words, the Tenseigan represents absolute power, and other aspects are extremely weak, such as this. With a cold smile, Sasuke sneered gloomily, and the 6 Tomo Rinnegan swayed strongly, and the majestic spiritual fluctuations directly poured into Dustless's mind. Dustless's eyes turned into circles of Rinnegan. Obviously, he was hit by the Rinnegan Genjutsu. In the unknown world, there was a white mist, like the beginning of the world, and the light was particularly dim. Allay! It seems that I was careless. I forgot that when the kid was born with the Rinnegan, he also got some unknown Genjutsu. In the strange world, a rather helpless voice sounded. Dustless touched his forehead in distress, and secretly scolded himself for being careless and negligent, which allowed Sasuke's plot to succeed. However, as Sasuke said, Dustless's Tenseigan has no way to defend against these Genjutsu, and as he said, you can't have your cake and eat it too. The Tenseigan has the power to destroy everything, and resisting Genjutsu is really not a compliment. Perhaps this is one of the weaknesses of the Tenseigan. Of course, Dustless doesn't know whether Otsutsuki's Tenseigan can resist Genjutsu. After all, the ability of Tenseigan varies from person to person. Well, I hope you can still be so optimistic when I tear you to pieces. Uchiha Sasuke came out of the void like a ghost. Dustless said that the situation was not optimistic, but anyone could hear that Dustless didn't care. It's a very powerful Genjutsu. Looking at the almost boundless world around him from the corner of his eyes, Dustless praised generously. Facing such a terrifying Genjutsu, he really can't solve it for the time being. Don't worry, I won't let you die so easily. Cold killing intent surged in Ling Er's eyes. Uchiha Sasuke, who had transformed into Ling Er, revealed his killing intent and said coldly, you can treat this as an illusion that is countless times stronger than Tsukuyomi. Everything in this world is under my control. In this world, I am the god of creation. Uchiha Sasuke said with unruly hatred. Is that so? Hearing this, Dustless just smiled with relief, without too much emotional fluctuation. His eyes were filled with calmness, as if Uchiha Sasuke in the Genjutsu world had switched places with him. Humph. Now I will let you understand the horror of this Rinnegan Genjutsu. The killing intent in his eyes condensed into ice, and Uchiha Sasuke sneered. Immediately, under Dustless's gaze, Uchiha Sasuke suddenly stared at Dustless's right arm. Kacha. Intense pain spread all over his body. Dustless was taken aback and subconsciously looked at his right arm. Not bad. The scene that came into view was quite miserable. Dustless's right arm had been completely twisted, like a twisted dough twist, and the bones were no longer formed. This is just an appetizer, enjoy it. As Uchiha Sasuke's voice fell, Dustless's left arm was also twisted, and the difference between the bones and flesh could no longer be distinguished. An unprecedented pain spread throughout his body like a tide. Dustless's delicate little face instantly turned as pale as paper, and his body fell to the ground like a kite with a broken string. This feeling should be unforgettable for a lifetime. Seeing that Dustless's arms had been completely twisted, Uchiha Sasuke stepped forward and looked at Dustless, who fell to the ground and was about to lose consciousness. Without hesitation, he pulled out the Kusanagi sword from his waist. The cold light reflected in Dustless's eyes, and the former's eyes were full of despair. Just glancing at Dustless, Uchiha Sasuke didn't have the slightest mercy. After a long while, Dustless's entire body was dripping with blood, finally dead. Seeing the bloody holes all over Dustless's body, including his breathing and heartbeat, Uchiha Sasuke took back his Kusanagi sword. It took a lot of effort, finally. Pucci, you finally killed me, but I'm sorry, you are too weak. Uchiha Sasuke turned around and saw Dustless with a sly smile, and at the same time, a golden sword was inserted into Uchiha Sasuke's abdomen. It was Dustless holding the Kusanagi sword with a smile on his face. Chapter 126. Lowering his head, Uchiha Sasuke looked at the golden sword that penetrated his abdomen. His eyes were dull. Then he looked up and saw Dustless's cold face with a fox-like sneer. His pupils instantly dilated, and his mind was like paste. He instantly lost the ability to think. Impossible. Resisting the urge to vomit blood in his heart, Uchiha Sasuke clenched his teeth and broke free from the sword. The stinging and burning pain suddenly spread from his abdomen to every corner of his body. Dustless was just stabbed to death by him. Uchiha Sasuke still remembered the scene of hundreds of bloody holes in his body. Impossible? What makes you think it's impossible? Looking at Uchiha Sasuke with a faint smile on his face, Dustless asked with interest. His tone was full of disdain. It's ridiculous to think that you're omnipotent. Because this world was created by me, and I am an omnipotent god. Ignoring Dustless's sarcasm, Uchiha Sasuke recovered. Dustless's pierced abdomen healed in a blink of an eye. Then he looked at the indifferent Dustless gloomily. When he said the word God, he deliberately emphasized the word, for fear that Dustless couldn't understand what he meant. Is that so, the world you created as a god? How can you be hurt by me? Dustless asked, looking at the gloomy Uchiha Sasuke with disdain. His face was full of contempt, and with endless sneer. A world created by Genjutsu dares to call itself a god. It's really ridiculous. And as Uchiha Sasuke said before, all Genjutsu created by human beings have loopholes. Dustless's Tenseigan does have weaknesses, but Uchiha Sasuke's Rinnegan Genjutsu also has weaknesses. It's ridiculous for him to regard himself as a special existence. I might as well tell you, I can ignore any Genjutsu in the world, no exception to Genjutsu. Only physical attacks can affect me. Giving Uchiha Sasuke a sympathetic look, Dustless told the truth. Uchiha Sasuke's Rinnegan Genjutsu is not a common thing. Dustless still remembers that after sealing Otsutsuki Kagaya, Uchiha Sasuke and Uzumaki Naruto had a shocking battle. At that time, Sasuke just casually glanced at the nine-tailed beasts and completely controlled them, and then used Chibaku Tensei to seal them. It can be seen how terrifying Uchiha Sasuke's Rinnegan Genjutsu is. Genjutsu. Let's see if your ability is really that great. Uchiha Sasuke was furious when he heard this. He was so angry that he didn't care about any bullshit tactics. As the god of creation of this world, everything in the world was under his control. He could destroy Dustless with a flick of his finger. Crack! With a wave of his hand, a hurricane swept over and instantly split Wu Chen's body into several pieces. It was a clean and thorough dismemberment. You're just an ant. Seeing this, Uchiha Sasuke curled his lips, his face full of disdain. You're the one who made a mistake. The ghostly voice sounded again. Dustless's Genjutsu body recovered, and looked at Uchiha Sasuke, who was stunned. It seems that you, the god who created the world, is not very useful. You can't kill me, an intruder. Dustless's mocking voice was filled with endless ridicule. He was extremely disgusted with Uchiha Sasuke. This should be his Mangekyo or his Tenseigan ability. Uchiha Sasuke's face was livid, his fists clenched, and his eyes were fixed on Dustless's foxy smile. He was so depressed that he vomited blood. The world in front of him is equivalent to the infinitely magnified Tsukuyomi world. Its power is much stronger than Tsukuyomi. As the god of creation in Tsukuyomi world, he can be ridiculed by Dustless. A jutsu that can ignore any jinjutsu. Bastard, how can such a ninjutsu exist? Uchiha Sasuke's face was extremely ugly. A jutsu that can ignore any jinjutsu in the world is beyond the scope of ninjutsu. It seems that you're at your wit's end. The so-called god of creation is really disappointing. Slightly raising his eyelids, Dustless deliberately emphasized the word god of creation. He stretched his tone, fearing that Uchiha Sasuke couldn't understand what he meant. Goodbye. The so-called god of creation, Tsukuyomi. Puchi. In the outside world, Uchiha Sasuke suddenly began to vomit blood. His handsome smiling face became pale like paper. He couldn't bear the burden, and knelt on the ground with half of his leg. His bright eyes dimmed. Full of hesitation suddenly, the corner of his mouth raised a self-deprecating smile. Uchiha Sasuke's face was even more embarrassed. I'm afraid that he's the first person to use Rinnegan Jinjutsu and get backfired on by the opponent. What is that guy pursuing in his heart? How could he give birth to such a ninjutsu? Looking at the expressionless Dustless, who seemed to be out of tune with the whole world, Uchiha Sasuke said incredulously, any dojutsu is almost inextricably linked to the host's heart. Dustless can have such an unheard of jutsu, which shows exactly what his heart wants. Seeing Uchiha Sasuke looking at himself in horror, Dustless's mouth raised a smile without a trace. In fact, the jutsu he just showed was a ninjutsu born from Mangekyo's right eye after he merged with Hashirama's cells. Although this jutsu is extremely heaven-defying, Dustless didn't care, because it only belongs to the category of passive defense. There is no one who can make Dustless defend passively, so he hasn't used it, and it's only effective against Jinjutsu. I might as well tell you, the jutsu just now is called Omniscient and Omnipotent. The principle is just like its literal meaning. Any ninjutsu that I know can't hurt me. Of course, only those who are immune to it, such as Jinjutsu, are immune to physical attacks. Dustless said honestly, it's okay to tell Uchiha Sasuke anyway, he's just a simulation character. Staring at the sluggish face of Uchiha Sasuke, Dustless said in a deep voice, whether it's Kotoame Tsukumi, Izanami, or Infinite Tsukuyomi, these jutsu that I know can't affect me. As the name says, omniscient and omnipotent, know everything, ignore everything. Chapter 127. To be fair, Dustless really doesn't value this jutsu much. Even if he is very powerful, and can ignore any ability he knows. Whether it's the so-called Infinite Tsukuyomi, the strongest Jinjutsu Kotoame Tsukumi, or even Izanami, but in the end it's a passive defense. Dustless is not the kind of person who is passive defense. There are only a few people who can make Dustless adopt a passive defense strategy. Well, the next step is how to take everything from you. Murderous intent flashed in his eyes, and his sharp eyes stared at Uchiha Sasuke on the ground. Dustless's heart couldn't help but jump to his throat. Once Uchiha Sasuke is completely killed, it means that he will take everything from him and inherit his identity as Indra's reincarnation. Dustless's body also implanted Hashirama's cells, which means that it is possible to evolve again after taking Uchiha Sasuke's 6th Tomo Rinnegan. Whoosh! A black shadow suddenly fell. Dustless was slightly stunned. Staring at the fragments of clothes floating at his feet, his eyes flashed. Uchiha Sasuke used 6 Tomo Rinnegan's jutsu, Heavenly Hand Power, to attack him. Get out of my way! Dustless suddenly shouted. His voice was like rolling thunder, and at the same time, a strong repulsive force broke out of his body and directly bounced Uchiha Sasuke's sword. What a powerful force! Uchiha Sasuke flew back dozens of feet, barely supporting his body, pinching his numb right arm, and then looked at Dustless with a heavy heart. Summoning Jutsu Kyubi, Manjikyu Sharingan flashed decisively, and Uchiha Sasuke didn't hesitate to summon Kyubi. Its huge orange body was almost the same size as the mountain, and the behemoth with 9 tails was exposed in front of Dustless. Its scarlet eyes were filled with endless killing intent, and its sharp claws could easily pierce through everything in the world. Its strong and powerful arms were filled with explosive power. Why is there a Kyuubi? Looking at the summoning of Kyuubi, Dustless was extremely speechless. He can understand that Uchiha Madara has Kyuubi, but what does Kyuubi have to do with Uchiha Sasuke? Is it because Uchiha Sasuke once joined forces with Uzumaki Naruto to summon Kyuubi? Forget it, let nature take its course. He smiled bitterly and comforted himself. Dustless knew that this was the perverted part of the system. No matter what trick, no matter whether it was related to Uchiha Sasuke or not, as long as it was used, Uchiha Sasuke can use it in the world of the system. Because this Uchiha Sasuke himself was transformed from the system Linger, he was omnipotent, including the psychic Kyuubi. Kinsusuno. Under Wu Chen's astonished gaze, Ninetales put on the purple armor. Her aura was even more piercingly cold. Her physique was undoubtedly bigger and more powerful. Kyuubi, wearing Kinsusuno, held a black long sword in his hand, which was made by Uchiha Sasuke using Amaterasu. He didn't need to think about what would happen if he was hit by the black big sword. It's really a tricky technique. Dustless looked at the huge Kyuubi cautiously, and his heart inevitably sank. His eyes solidified, and he vigilantly looked at Uchiha Sasuke standing on top of Kyuubi's head. Ao ao ao. A deafening roar came out of Kyuubi's mouth, as if to celebrate his breaking out of the prison and the joy of seeing the sun again. Kyuubi's chakra went berserk, and his feet slammed on the ground, and the whole ground suddenly trembled. Whoa! The sawtooth mouth full of fangs opened, and a black energy ball formed in an instant. The high-density chakra energy ball was huge, and the aura of destruction around it made people unconsciously desperate. So big. Feeling the hurricane thrown out by the high-speed rotation of the giant Bijidama, Dustless's face changed slightly, and he was very cautious, staring at the expanding energy ball, and his eyes flashed with a touch of determination. Uchiha Fire Formation. Boom! A crimson flame wall emerged from Kyuubi's feet, and the high temperature of the flame barrier instantly exploded the Bijidama that Kyuubi painstakingly condensed, and it suddenly burst open and swallowed Kyuubi's body. What a thick turtle shell! Looking through the heavy black smoke, Dustless clearly saw the Kinsusuno on Kyuubi's body, and all the power of the explosion just now was isolated from Kyuubi's body. The ultimate body Kinsusuno's defense was beyond doubt, and the only time it was completely broken was during the battle between Uchiha Madara and Hashirama in the Valley of the End. Kacha! Kyuubi, who was blown away by the explosion of the Bijidama, immediately rushed forward, and the sharp sword in his hand poured down, destroying Dustless's Uchiha Fire Formation. You're going to die. Looking contemptuously at the barrier that was destroyed by Kyuubi's overwhelming power, Sasuke seemed to have regained his confidence after being trampled on. Then he looked down at Wu Chun with disdain and affection on his face. You don't understand human feelings, boy. Seeing this, Dustless just touched his nose, and didn't feel any surprise, because Uchiha Sasuke is such a proud and conceited person. Of course, with his current strength, he indeed has the ability to despise Dustless. In that case, I will completely erase you and the Kyuubi under your feet. After observing the Kyuubi under Sasuke's feet for a while, Dustless's murderous intent burst out, and the murderous intent in his words made people tremble. Anyway, even if this Kyuubi has nothing to do with the real world, it's just a simulation of the system. It's not a big deal if it dies. Take this. With Dustless's angry shout, several green beads suddenly appeared in front of him, rotating with a distance between each other, and the size of a disc. It was full of endless ominous. That trick again. This guy can't use that without limit, damn it. Doesn't he have dojutsu restrictions? Seeing this, Sasuke's face slightly changed, and his face became ugly. At the same time, Dustless's cold voice resounded through the sky. Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. Chapter 128. Feeling the endless sharpness of the golden light beam, Uchiha Sasuke's face changed, and his eyelids couldn't help but twitch. Anyone can see the hidden fear in his eyes. The move in front of him is obviously a dojutsu, and the power is extremely great, enough to easily split the world. It can be imagined that the amount of dojutsu consumed is definitely much more than Chibaku Tensei. However, what made Uchiha Sasuke speechless is that Dustless is too much of a monster. The previous battle should have consumed a lot of dojutsu, and now he can use such a shocking move like Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. It seems that there is no limit at all. It seems that I can only fight hard. His eyes suddenly emitted a burst of light. Uchiha Sasuke's eyes surged with killing intent. Facing the golden light beam in Dustless's hand, his face was full of eagerness. Obviously, Uchiha Sasuke is obviously not the kind of lamb that likes to wait for death. Oh, good fighting spirit. Feeling the strong fighting spirit of Uchiha Sasuke, Dustless smiled. And then his eyes slightly narrowed, and the light from his eyes was extremely dangerous. Combined with Dustless's aura, it really made people feel extremely oppressed and afraid. Whoosh! The golden light beam stretched without limit. Although it was only the size of a thumb, the bright afterglow covered the entire system world, and the sharpness of the light beam made people tremble. So long. Looking at the endless light, even with Uchiha Sasuke's calm mentality, he couldn't help but secretly smack his tongue. His face was horrified. His eyes were extremely unnaturally enlarged, and even the corner of his mouth was slightly trembling. Although he had seen it twice before, facing this light beam that covered the whole world, Uchiha Sasuke's heart couldn't help but feel small, as if he encountered an unprecedented natural enemy, making him extremely uncomfortable. Whoosh! The black shadow suddenly slid down rapidly, and suddenly looked up. It was Dustless with a cold face, controlling the golden light beam, to sweep the Kyuubi under Sasuke's beast's disaster. The golden light revealed its sharpness, crushing everything in its path with an unstoppable momentum, as if it was looking down on all living things. Along the way, several giant mountains that were thousands of meters tall were directly cut in half, easily piercing through them, as if they were pieces of paper. It directly whistled towards the side of the nine-tailed beast's calamity. From the looks of it, it wanted to completely split the nine-tailed beast's body in half, just like how it cut the mountain in half before. We have to stop it. On top of Kyuubi's head, Uchiha Sasuke's pupils suddenly shrank. He smelled a strong sense of death from that unstoppable light. A huge purple longbow suddenly appeared in Kyuubi's hand, and the black arrow made of Amaterasu was clearly visible. Kyuubi's face was ferocious, and his strong arm pulled the bowstring to the limit and shot it with the most ferocious force. So, the big hand that tightly pulled the bowstring suddenly loosened, and the black arrow suddenly shot out, going up against the current, and the friction in the air made a white wave. Overconfident, trying to shake the world with the power of floater, this is unrealistic. Seeing the black arrow roaring out with ferocious momentum, it was not difficult to see that it wanted to break Dustless's golden wheel reincarnation explosion, trying to delay the attack of the light beam on Kyuubi. Ridiculous. Slightly shaking his head, Dustless looked at the two attacks that were about to collide. The black arrow cut through the void, and inevitably collided with the light beam. However, what surprised everyone was that the two tyrannical forces didn't explode and cancel each other out. The golden light instantly swallowed the black arrow that came in contact with it. Bastard! Uchiha Sasuke's mouth twitched fiercely, and then he didn't hesitate to escape from the beast's disaster, and jumped into the sky, his eyes fixed on the sweeping light beam, and his face was full of horror. Pucci! The Susanoo wrapped around the Kyuubi was easily torn apart like clothes. It couldn't withstand a single blow, and the ultimate form Susanoo, that gave the world supreme pressure, was instantly annihilated and cut off. Ken Susanoo's Kyuubi also couldn't escape death. Under Uchiha Sasuke's stunned gaze, he saw the straight golden light passing through Kyuubi's orange body, and Kyuubi's body was easily divided, along with the ultimate body Ken Susanoo. It was cut in half. Boom! Kyuubi's upper body, which was cut in half, fell to the ground like a mountain, and the ground trembled fiercely, raising smoke and dust. This guy actually killed Kyuubi. Looking at the cut Kyuubi in disbelief, Uchiha Sasuke's pupils dilated and lost their bright color. No wonder he was so surprised. After all, this was Kyuubi's first real death. Don't show such a surprised expression. Don't worry, I'll send you to accompany him. On the ground, Dustless's body glowed with a golden luster, crossing layers of space, and when he reappeared, he was already beside Uchiha Sasuke, and the Kusanagi sword in his hand swept across. The cold light was about to cut him into pieces. Clang! At this critical moment, Uchiha Sasuke pulled out the Kusanagi sword from his waist to block Dustless's attack. The huge force from his arm made him slightly stunned. He didn't expect Dustless's strength to be so great, and looking at Dustless's calm appearance, it was obvious that he didn't use all his strength. Laser! Dustless didn't have any surprise when he saw this, and he flicked the golden light beam. Pucci! Caught off guard, or even unable to react, Uchiha Sasuke's chest and arm were directly penetrated by the burning light beam, and he could clearly see the small hole and the sky on the other side. Lightspeed kick. Boom! Boom! The strong and powerful leg bombarded Uchiha Sasuke's body, and suddenly his chest caved in, and then he slammed heavily on the ground, creating a deep pit. Chapter 129. Dustless looked at the half-dead Uchiha Sasuke expressionlessly, waved his hand, and countless golden light poured down. His vitality is quite strong. Feeling Sasuke's weak breathing, Dustless's eyes flashed with surprise, and suddenly a tiredness that he had never felt before poured into his mind. Dustless's vision was blurred, and his eyes were slightly stinging, so Dustless subconsciously closed his eyes. After fusing with Hashirama's cells, this was the first time he felt this physical exhaustion. Is this the side effect of overusing dojutsu? It's really a long-lost feeling. Dustless's arm gently rubbed the corner of his eyes, and when he opened his eyes again, his eyeballs were covered with blood, like a spider's web, swallowing the entire eyeball. Both eyes were the same, especially the Tensigen in the right eye, red and blue mixed with each other, and it was particularly terrifying. Kinsusunu Chidori. Seeing Dustless's tiredness after using his dojutsu, Sasuke seized the opportunity to rush towards Dustless. Kinsusunu's hand flashed with dazzling lightning, making it impossible to look directly at it. You think I overused my dojutsu, so you want to sneak attack me? Stupid! Dustless's voice was filled with endless chill and sneer. It's too ridiculous to think that he can't do anything to Sasuke because of his excessive dojutsu. Uchiha Flame Formation. Boom! The ultimate body Kinsusunu's huge body was not easy to move, and Dustless's attack was a sudden attack, so naturally, it was inevitable that he had a close contact with the flame barrier. The heavy armor was suddenly melted by the blazing flame wall, and quickly peeled off layer by layer, and Kinsusunu was about to turn into ashes. Break for me! Accompanied by Sasuke's roar, Kinsusunu's right hand's Chidori bombarded the flame barrier, and the flame barrier that dyed the sky red immediately burst, and the sky was clear again. Good opportunity. Dustless's pupil suddenly burst out, because of the melting of Kinsusunu before. His defense was much weaker than before, and even the left half of his arm was completely melted. Silver Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. Whoosh! The huge tornado swept out unscrupulously, and it swept straight towards Kinsusunu, who was already dying. Dustless's chakra was almost exhausted, and its range was naturally larger than before. Ninjutsu has no limit. It is completely different for the caster. Dustless injected chakra without reservation, and the giant tornado became larger as a result, like a spring in the deep sea, crazily swallowing everything around it. After fighting for half a day, Dustless's dojutsu power reached its limit, and so did Uchiha Sasuke. At this moment, the ultimate body Susanoo was completely swallowed by the hurricane. Pucci Pucci! The moment the tornado shrouded, Kinsusanoo was like being cut by hundreds of millions of blades at the same time, and his defense completely collapsed and dissipated. In just a few breaths, he was completely swept away, and Sasuke was soon exposed to the tornado. The same scene played out as Kinsusanoo. It seems that the kid is finally dead. Seeing Sasuke's flesh and blood flying everywhere, Dustless was relieved, and casually found a place to sit on the ground, looking dispirited and listless. It seems that Dustless also reached his limit. As for Sasuke, he became a pile of white bones. It's really a complete destruction. Dustless saw this and took a deep breath. Originally, Silver Wheel Reincarnation Explosion didn't have this kind of power. But because he injected chakra without reservation, this technique produced a qualitative change and gave Sasuke a fatal blow. In other words, suddenly remembering that Sasuke was completely destroyed by himself, Dustless's eyes were full of light, and he realized that he will soon inherit everything. This is, inside the body, suddenly warm power flowed out, wandering around the meridians, moistening Dustless's body. This strange and familiar energy was quite strange, and there was a feeling of enlightenment in his heart. It was very similar to Dustless's blood. This is the power of Uchiha Sasuke. Gently closing his eyes, carefully savoring the amazing changes in his body. After coming to this world for so many years, Dustless was relieved. Only by having Rinnegan and Tenseigan at the same time, Dustless can sit back and relax. After all, the strength of the late-stage characters is obvious to all. They are either Rakuto level or quasi-Rakuto. Although Dustless is extremely conceited, he is not confident that he will be invincible against them, let alone defeat them completely. And there is also the existence of Otsutsuki Kagaya, who is known as the god of creation. It's so itchy. Dustless subconsciously rubbed his eyes. He felt itchy in his eye sockets as if something had grown out. It was filled with strong vitality and an indescribable throbbing he had never felt before. Dustless can't tell the specific feeling. No, the Mangekyo of the left and right eyes has strengthened. After carefully feeling for a while, Dustless suddenly opened his eyes, ecstatically, and even with a rare tremor in his voice, he can clearly feel that his Mangekyo's eye power has increased in an instant, and it is completely different from before. It is not an exaggeration to say that it is a dimensional gap. It seems that it has become Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Although the shape of the Mangekyo in Dustless's left eye has not changed, the eye power has been different, and it has exceeded the level of Mangekyo Sharingan. It is worthy of the name Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. This is. His left eye suddenly swayed with stronger energy fluctuations, even stronger than the Mangekyo that was born just now. The blood was dense, and the violent chakra was surging in the eye socket, and the eyeball was about to burst. Dustless can clearly feel that his left eye has turned purple, and a circle of mysterious black ripples spread from it, and there are some black tomo hanging from it. Chapter 130. Dustless's left eye was unusually itchy, as if tens of thousands of ants were biting it. The pain was unbearable, and he couldn't help but grab his left eye. "Don't worry, your left eye is evolving." A light voice stopped Dustless's action. She looked up slightly. It was Ling Er, who was devastatingly beautiful. She was wearing a simple and elegant dress. Her 3,000 deep black willow hair danced in the wind. Her slender figure was like the breeze of time, which couldn't be touched. She was exceptionally ethereal, as if she had walked out of a painting. She gave people a feeling of a goddess above the ninth heaven. Even today, I still feel this way. Raising his eyelids and glancing at Ling Er, Dustless shook his head. No matter when Ling Er gave him the feeling of looking at flowers in the fog, there's always a layer of fog, and he couldn't completely see through her, and her whole body was covered with a mysterious veil. Shaking his head, Dustless could only smile bitterly. The so-called Tenseigan's super insight ability couldn't see through Ling. This is not a gap in distance, but a gap in strength. Of course, I can feel that my left eye is evolving. Dustless glanced at Ling Er, and he could naturally feel the 6 black tomo in his left eye, as well as the purple pupil. These were the spoils of war after he defeated Uchiha Sasuke. He took everything from Uchiha Sasuke. But then again, feeling that his left eye was a pure 6 tomo Rinnegan, Dustless frowned slightly and wondered. I already have the identity of Indra's reincarnation, and at the same time, I have Azura's chakra in my body, and when the 2 chakra touch, the power of the six paths will be born. Now, as Indra's reincarnation, I should awaken Rinnegan. Dustless's face was full of confusion. It's reasonable to say that this is only Uchiha Sasuke's Rinnegan, and his own Rinnegan hasn't been born yet. This will take time. Don't forget, after Uchiha Madara implanted Hashirama's flesh, it took many years to awaken Rinnegan. Glancing at Dustless, Ling faintly explained. That's true. Although he felt that Linger's words were perfunctory, the fact was that when Madara opened his Rinnegan, he was indeed 100 years old. I'm afraid that no one in the world will be your match in the future. Ling stared deeply into Dustless's eyes as she calmly explained. Her tone seemed to hold Dustless in high esteem, but in Dustless's eyes, it had a different meaning. Who knows? Dustless glanced at Ling and then stood up. He moved his body slightly, and the sound of bones cracking could be heard. His eyes were indifferent as he stared at the void in front of him. His clear eyes flickered with an elusive light. In the rain-hidden village in an unknown secret room. Dustless, what happened to you? Who could injure you like this? Looking at the battered and exhausted Wu Chun, Otsutsuki Yulua frowned slightly. She circled around Wu Chun and immediately touched her chin with her slender fingers. She said in disbelief, "What kind of person can make you like this?" Although Dustless didn't have any wounds on his body, his face was pale, and his eyes were dull, as if he had just recovered from a serious illness. His temperament was abnormal, with a sense of dispiritedness. Taking a glance at Wuchen, Otsutsuki Haruo carefully helped him to sit down, looking like a pretty girl from a humble family, without the usual indifference. This made Dustless feel a little flattered. I'm fine. It's just that my eye power was severely overdrawn. Waving his hand, he signaled Otsutsuki Yukaro not to worry. Wu Chen immediately smiled, giving people a feeling of gentleness. After the battle with Uchiha Sasuke in the system, Dustless's eyes still hadn't recovered, and his physical condition was not good. His eyes were damaged in the system, and the same was true in the real world. Where did that kid Obito go? He's not learning ninjutsu from that old guy Uchiha Madara again, is he? Kuroda was speechless and asked Haguro. Since Obito was pulled into hell by him, he didn't give up on practicing ninjutsu. He worked very hard, thinking all day long about when to attack Konoha. Isn't this all your fault? That Uzumaki Nagato is the same. Rolling her eyes, Haguro gave Dustless a big supercilious look. Yahiko was deliberately killed under Dustless's indifference. Therefore, Uzumaki Nagato fell into the devil's path and became completely desperate in the real world. Rin was also controlled by Dustless, and then she was killed. And Obito, who she saw with her own eyes, was completely corrupted. So Dustless took Madara's part and dominated everything. Isn't that good? As long as this is the case, they will obey my orders. Dustless chuckled and shrugged casually. He didn't care about this. Anyway, if he didn't do this, Madara would do it in the future. What are you going to do next? Staring at Dustless's eyes, Haguro whispered. I'm afraid that Obito will attack Konoha soon. Speaking of this, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's voice stopped. Although Obito's strength has improved rapidly, especially under Madara's guidance, he is still not an opponent of Yellow Flash Minato. Let him go. That kid won't calm down if he doesn't vent his anger and turn Konoha upside down. Dustless's eyes were deep and long. Obito was still useful to him. Frowning slightly, he whispered. When the time comes, I'll go to Konoha with Obito. Although Obito was safe in the end, just in case, Dustless chose to accompany him to Konoha. It would be best to recover the Kyuubi. Now the Hachibi is in his hands and so is the Geto Mazo. It's really a headache. I hope that little Tanuki doesn't get killed. Now, the only one of the nine-tailed beasts whose whereabouts was unknown was Ichibi Shikaku. If he didn't take care to kill it, then even if Wuchen wanted to cry, he wouldn't have a place to cry. He could only silently pray that this little raccoon cat would survive this disaster. Resurrecting the Jubi is essential. Chapter 131. It's no wonder that Dustless is so worried about the safety of the Ichibi. After all, it's related to the resurrection of the Jubi. Although he can find chakra, no one in the world has a Chibi's chakra. Let's just go with the flow. Shaking his head gently, Dustless no longer entangled this issue. Whether the Achibi is dead or not, it's not something he can control at the moment. There are still many things for him to do. Dustless doesn't want to spend time on this kind of problem that only God knows. Your dojutsu hasn't recovered yet. It's better for me to go to Konoha instead of you. Her beautiful watery eyes looked seriously at Dustless's pale face. Otsutsuki Haguro said worriedly. Dustless is her hope to revive the Otsutsuki clan in the future. Of course, this flower of hope can't wither before it blooms. Don't worry. Looking at Otsutsuki Haguro with a comforting look, Dustless chuckled and said, even if my eyes are blind, Senju Hashirama is reborn. Konoha can come and go as I please. When talking about Senju Hashirama, Dustless's mouth swept a contemptuous smile. Even if he is resurrected, Dustless can easily defeat him. Not to mention that Dustless's dojutsu is only temporarily overdrawn. Do as you wish. Seeing that Wu Chun was so determined, especially his confident and exultant look, it was like a shot in the arm. It made Yulua silent. She just stood beside Wu Chun quietly. She usually gave people the impression of being cold, but this was the first time she was so well behaved. At this time, Otsutsuki Haguro was a feast for the eyes. The elegant and natural fragrance rushed into his ears and nose. Dustless was suddenly stunned, like poison, his eyes were dazed. Dustless you. Perceiving Dustless's abnormality, Otsutsuki Haguro's face also changed slightly. Being stared at by Dustless, she was quite embarrassed, even though they were already husband and wife. Cough cough cough, sorry I was distracted for a while. Dustless's old face was slightly red, he coughed awkwardly, and quickly changed the topic. However, you can rest assured that as a man, it's too shameful to make a woman worry. Face. Hearing this, Yulua looked at Wu Chun with jealousy and said unhappily, only a fool would care about Face. I just want to live on peacefully. I don't have much hope. Wu Chun didn't say anything, and just looked at Yulua quietly. He felt a rare satisfaction in his heart, and his face showed a rare sincere kindness. What else could he ask for in life? Haguro. Haguro Haguro, Haguro Haguro Haguros Haguro Haguro Haguro, Haguro Haguro Haguro. Haguro Haguro. Haguro. Dustless, wearing a spiral mask, looked at Obito, who was panting on the ground, and smiled under the mask. This kid is so hard to train himself all day long. In the empty depths of the underground, only Obito and Zetsu were left. As for Madara, that old man, he died not long ago. Are you here to stop me from attacking Konoha? Looking at Dustless's spiral mask, Obito didn't need to think to know why Dustless was looking for him. In front of Dustless, he didn't need to wear a mask to hide his identity. Besides Madara, Dustless was the only one who knew his identity. If there's one thing that Obito is most interested in right now, besides the destruction of Konoha, it's the identity of Dustless. He has asked Madara about this matter before, but Madara gave him a perfunctory answer. Until Madara's death, Obito didn't ask who Dustless was. That's not it, and instead of stopping you, I will help you. Dustless smiled, his tone was very flat, which showed that Dustless was serious. Help me. Hearing this, Obito frowned and looked at Dustless in confusion. Although he and Dustless spent a very short time together, it didn't mean that he didn't know what kind of person Dustless was. This is a smiling tiger. Whether it's strength or shrewdness, he's on the same level as Madara. He's definitely a master who eats people without spitting out the bones. Do you think I can trust you? Looking at Dustless faintly, Obito asked. Although before his death, Madara told him that Dustless was reliable and a trustworthy ally, he was no longer the naive boy he was before. It was necessary to explore Dustless's purpose. Dustless-sama. White Zetsu didn't have as complicated thoughts as Obito. He knew that Dustless was a trustworthy existence, at least for now. Humph. Seeing White Zetsu and Dustless's familiarity, Obito just snorted with dissatisfaction, and immediately said coldly, I don't care what your purpose is in going to Konoha, but Namikaze Minato will die. Speaking of this, Obito's eyes were filled with murderous intent, and he looked very fierce. Idiot. Dustless saw this and smiled contemptuously, thinking, even if you're a villain on the same level as Madara, after all, you're just a pawn of mine. Shaking his head, the gap between Obito and Madara wasn't small at all. When Minato's wife gives birth, I will take the opportunity to attack and extract the Kyuubi from Uzumaki Kushina's body. After pondering for a while, Obito spoke of his plan. As for the life and death of his former master's wife, it doesn't matter to him anymore. Anyway, Obito's goal is to avenge Rin's death. That's not a problem. I will help you contain the rest of Konoha. Seeing Obito so insistent that Minato killed Rin Noira, Dustless was relieved. Fortunately, he used the Tensigen to perfectly control Rin's mind and body. Otherwise, with Obito's current state of mind, he might have noticed something fishy. Chapter 132. Dustless didn't have any doubts about Obito's plan, because his plan was successful. He successfully released the Kyuubi, and although it was a pity that he didn't kill Minato himself, at least he succeeded in killing the couple because of the Kyuubi. To some extent, Obito's plan was indeed perfect. Although the Kyuubi's plan to destroy Konoha's ninja village was successfully stopped by the fourth Hokage, overall, it was good and feasible. If Dustless Sama joins us, this plan to attack Konoha's ninja village will definitely succeed. White Zetsu has seen Dustless's strength with his own eyes. He can confront Madara head-on, and he's not at a disadvantage. His combat power is absolutely incredible. Compared to Uchiha Obito, he was much stronger. Indeed, Black Zetsu also nodded, but there was a vague fear in his eyes. Even Dustless didn't catch this subtle change. In that case, we will invade Konoha immediately. Obito put on his spiral mask, revealing only his Mangekyo Sharingan, and said murderously. As for Dustless's purpose, Obito was too lazy to ask. Anyway, as Zetsu said, with Dustless's help, the chance of destroying Konoha will only be greater. Unknowingly, the Third Shinobi World War was completely over. Although Konoha also suffered heavy losses, it was much stronger than the other four villages. Especially after the surrender of the rock in the sand, Konoha gained a lot of benefits, and its combat power soared, leaving the cloud behind. The bitter cloud-hidden village could only grit their teeth and swallow their anger, secretly investigating Wuchin's whereabouts. The victory of the Third Shinobi World War established Konoha's position as the overlord. Compared to the other four villages, the whole village was filled with joy and laughter. Sure enough, once people indulge in peace, no matter who they are, they will fall and stop evolving. Minato-sensei, you are the same. Obito, wearing a one-eyed mask, stood on the forest, looking indifferently at the giant village in the distance, and the tone of his voice suddenly changed. Destroy Konoha, from now on. Hearing this, Dustless, who was standing next to Obito, glanced at him, then turned his head and looked at the village in front of him indifferently. However, the most shocking thing was that Dustless just stood in the void calmly and quietly, as if he was standing on some invisible support point. He just floated in the sky calmly like that. This guy's ability is really strange, and the people around him are also very strange. Staring at Wuchin floating in the air, Obito's face changed slightly. The surprise in his three Tomo Sharingan was clear, especially the woman floating in the air beside Wuchin, which made him even more surprised. It was really strange that these two people could float in the sky without the help of external forces. The woman beside Dustless was naturally Otsutsuki Haruo. The only difference was that Otsutsuki Haruo's eyebrows sometimes appeared lazy, with a sense of maturity that had never been there before. And between her eyebrows, there was an indescribable attraction, just like a peerless demon. Obviously, she had been cured by Dustless a few days ago. However, the only regrettable thing was that the beautiful woman's face was cold at the moment, and she had an expression that rejected people thousands of miles away, especially that extremely indifferent face, which made Obito stop the idea of going forward to talk to her. In the past, he took the initiative to talk to Otsutsuki Haruo, wanting to take advantage of her close relationship with Dustless to ask about Dustless's identity. But he was directly ignored. What's going on? Why do I keep feeling that the woman beside Dustless is familiar? Black Zetsu looked at Otsutsuki Haruo vaguely. He didn't know why, but he always had a feeling of déjà vu. But he couldn't figure out who it was. This strange feeling began from the first time he saw Otsutsuki Haruo. Now start implementing your plan. Obito. I will attack Konoha openly, lure the tiger away from the mountain, and attract the attention of Minato, Sandaime, and other ninjas, while you take the opportunity to capture the Kyuubi. Turning his head and glancing at Obito, Dustless then retracted his gaze and looked straight at the huge village in front of him, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He no longer had any feelings for Konoha. Well, that's the best. Obito nodded. If Dustless could take the initiative to attract the attention of Konoha's ninjas, it would be the best, and the plan to steal the Kyuubi would be even more perfect. Dustless also slightly nodded, and immediately turned into a rainbow light and swept straight ahead, followed by Otsutsuki Haruo. Haruo, you go and follow that Uchiha Obito kid. After a long while, Wu Chen's body suddenly stopped, and he ordered Otsutsuki Uluo behind him with a gloomy face. His cold eyes reflected a strong killing intent. Do you suspect that Uchiha Obito might betray us? Looking at Dustless in surprise, Otsutsuki Haruo tucked the hair on both sides of his bun behind his ears. That's not it. His loyalty to us is unquestionable. Dustless immediately shook his head. Uchiha Obito had been completely corrupted, and naturally, he would side with them. The only thing Dustless was worried about was that the kid couldn't fight against Minato. Minato is not that kind of simple person. In order to prevent any big mistakes, once you have no choice, you must kill him. His eyes filled with determination, Dustless said coldly. Minato was the only person who knew that he was controlling Rin. Only by completely erasing this unstable factor, Dustless's heart would sink into the sea, and he would be able to rest easy. Otsutsuki Haruo hesitated, nodded, and rushed in the direction of Uchiha Obito. Chapter 133. The reason why Dustless let Namikaze Minato live until now was really for the sake of Obito. Just like Uzumaki Nagato, it was just for the sake of killing the enemy with his own hands in the future, so that he could eliminate the demons in his heart and make Obito more loyal to him. However, if an unexpected situation happened, he could only send Namikaze Minato to heaven. But before that, Konoha's ninjas should be attracted here. Wu Chen lowered his gaze and looked at the brightly lit village on the ground. An indifferent smile hung on the corner of his mouth, giving people a strange feeling. Suddenly, his body stopped and floated casually in the sky. Things have changed. After so many years, I didn't expect to meet again in this scene. Goodbye, Konoha. The cool night breeze blew Wu Chen's messy hair. The emotion in his eyes quickly converged and turned into a cold, killing intent. He raised his head slightly and looked at many giant mountains in the distance. Wu Chen's palm suddenly exerted force. Kakaka. Boom. Boom. The humongous mountain suddenly began to shake, and a buzzing sound was heard. The strong wave made the entire village of Konoha move slowly. Looking down, one could clearly see that the village of Konoha on the ground was also shaking. The coverage was unprecedentedly vast and infinite. What's going on with this strong vibration? It doesn't seem like an ordinary earthquake. Feeling the unusual ground shaking, Minato's face changed dramatically. At first, he thought it was just an ordinary small earthquake, but he didn't expect that as time passed, the shaking not only did not weaken, but also continued to increase. His heart was filled with uneasiness and irritation. What's going on? Damn it, this happened at this time. Rubbing his golden hair angrily, Minato was extremely distressed and gloomy. Now, Uzumaki Kushina was giving birth, and such a strange geological change happened at this time, obviously indicating that things were unusual. At the same time, all the ninjas in Konoha felt the abnormality of the vibration and walked out of the house, looking at each other. They could see the shock in each other's eyes. It seems that something big has happened. I'm sorry, Kushina. Reluctantly looking at the barrier behind him, Namikaze Minato's face was full of regret. He sighed slightly and immediately turned to leave. Namikaze Minato was a person with a strong sense of responsibility. In his heart, the safety of the village was always the most important, and Uzumaki Kushina, who was about to give birth, was second. Minato himself was a speed-type ninja, and the golden rainbow cut through the night sky, rushing straight toward the center of Konoha at full speed, and soon disappeared. What a foolish man. Don't worry, your wife will meet you in hell soon. The void where Namikaze Minato was standing before distorted, showing a vortex shape, circle by circle, and a person wearing black clothes and a monocular mask appeared. His voice sounded extremely young, and there was a sense of transcendence in his tone, as if he had seen through the essence of the world. This was Uchiha Obito. It's really a secret place. Thanks to you, Zetsu. Looking around the secret and strange place, Obito nodded slightly, and immediately looked at the Nepenthes at his feet, and praised softly. Zetsu's intelligence-gathering ability is really not to be underestimated, especially the number of white Zetsu's clones. Thousands of them, almost all of the corners of the ninja world. There is little information that can't be gathered. This is a good barrier, but it doesn't have any effect on me. The corner of his mouth rose, and under the mask, Obito showed a contemptuous smile, and immediately walked into the square barrier without fear. Compared to Obito, who was very careful, the other side was huge, and there was a sea of people. It seems that it's almost time to start. Dustless's indifferent eyes swept through the crowd below, although he saw many people he knew in the past. For Dustless, who has completely sealed his heart, these people have become insignificant. After all, their positions and ideas are all different, and these friends who used to be separated are now all enemies. Ka. Pung pung pung. In the distance, the huge mountain collapsed due to the tremors, and countless meteorites continued to fall from the sky and mercilessly hit the ground. Staring at the collapsing mountain, Dustless suddenly raised his right arm and gently touched the broken stones with his palm, and then his right arm seemed to be full of magic power. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The lifeless boulders rose from the ground, ignoring the existence of the law of gravity, and soared into the sky, floating in the air as if they were floating. Looking around, the meteorites in the sky were big and small. Some were as big as a thumb, and some were as big as a beast, and they flew towards Dustless. This trick is really convenient. Looking up at the endless mountain rubble above his head, Dustless suddenly remembered the scene when he invaded the moon. At that time, Otsutsuki Hagoromo treated him with this jutsu and buried him alive. What goes around comes around. Today it's your turn to enjoy. Laughing happily, Wuchen's raised hand dropped down, and the gravel mountain in the sky completely ignored gravity fell instantly. The number was dense, and the scope was vast. It easily covered the whole village of Konoha. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Fortunately, it's a dark night, otherwise if it's daytime, you can clearly see the scene of thousands of meteorites pouring down like a torrential rain. It's extraordinarily spectacular and dazzling. Of course, there are some ninjas with outstanding abilities in Konoha below, especially the ninjas of the Hyuga clan and the Uchiha clan, who can see particularly clearly. Countless giant meteorites are mercilessly smashing towards them. Chapter 134. The ninjas of the Hyuga and Uchiha clans were stunned, and they looked at the meteorites in disbelief. After a while, their faces were filled with despair. Quick! Many ninjas of the Uchiha and Hyuga clans wanted to shout at the people around them to escape, but they swallowed the words that were about to come out of their mouths. With such a large range of dense attacks covering the entire Konoha, there was no way to escape. No matter where they escaped, there was only a dead end. Whoosh! Boom! Golden flashes of light streaked across the sky, effortlessly shattering the falling meteors. The words fourth generation leader could be clearly seen on the Haori behind him. After Minato landed on the ground, he directly shouted at the crowd, "Hurry up and hide. It's best to hide in the basement." Although this was a bad idea, It was also the best one Minato could think of so far. These meteorites almost covered the entire sky of Konoha, and it was impossible to defend all of them. They could only passively take the hits. Minato, who attacked the village. Damn, what an amazing scale. An angry old voice sounded, and it was the angry Sandaime. He thought that after handing over the village to Minato, the most capable young Hokage in history, he could enjoy his old age and live the rest of his life leisurely. However, looking at the current situation, whether he could survive this catastrophe was a problem. Sandaime-sama, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I don't know who the enemy is, and what technique they used to attack the village. Minato's mouth raised a self-deprecating smile, looking at the Sandaime's old face with guilt. As the Hokage of the village, it's really hard to explain that he didn't even know who the enemy was after being attacked by a sneak attack. Don't worry about these trivial things. It doesn't matter who the enemy is, the key is how to take them down. Speaking of this, the Sandaime's tone was completely cold, and his killing intent was revealed. He looked up at the sky. For ninjas of their level, there was almost no difference between day and night. Especially Dustless, who was wearing a mask, was still standing motionless in the sky. Obviously, he was deliberately exposing himself. Minato also stared at Dustless, and his brain cells began to speed up, thinking about Dustless's intention of attacking Konoha with such great fanfare. Boom, boom, boom. A large number of giant meteorites all hit Konoha's village, and countless houses and buildings collapsed. The ground was almost like the surface of the moon, and there were holes everywhere, big and small. This scene played out in the entire village. Bastard, bastard, bastard. We must make this bastard pay the price for attacking Konoha. His thunderous roar was like an erupting volcano, and the sound waves that spread out were like blazing heat waves. Everyone could not help but look sideways at the hysterical old man, who seemed to have gone mad. It turned out to be Danzo. Sandaime looked at Shimura Danzo and nodded calmly. Although this old enemy of his was always against him, his loyalty to Konoha was not to be doubted. Anyone could be sentenced to Konoha's ninja village, but not Shimura Danzo. Minato, you're the fourth Hokage, what are you standing there for? Hurry up and call the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki to kill that damn bastard. Shimura Danzo glared at Minato and said in a cold tone. If it weren't for Minato, the position of the fourth Hokage would have been his. For Shimura Danzo, who was crazy about being the fourth Hokage, it was hard for him to be nice to Minato. Danzo, it's impossible. Don't think about it, Kushina is on her due date. With a frown, the Sandaime coldly reprimanded Danzo, cursing him in his heart. This old guy was decades old, and he was still trying to harm his own people. How could he bear it? So what? The man in front of us is stronger than we imagined. If we don't call the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki to deal with him, who else can be his opponent? Danzo looked at the Sandaime with a sneer, and said in a righteous tone, not backing down. This was not only an opportunity to get rid of the masked man in the sky, but also to get rid of Uzumaki Kushina. Uzumaki Kushina was now pregnant, and if she was forced to fight against the masked man in the sky, both of them might die of exhaustion. In the end, Shimura Danzo would push the Root clan to be his Jinchuriki, and he would have another weapon in his hand to defeat the enemy. I'm the fourth Hokage, and I will protect the village even if I have to die. The killing intent in his eyes disappeared in a flash, and Minato coldly looked at Shimura Danzo. There was no room for negotiation, and his tone was full of courage. How could he not know what Danzo was thinking? He wanted his wife to deal with the masked man. Don't even think about it. What a joke. Can your death exchange for the safety of the entire village? Too naive, Minato. Danzo mocked Minato. Although he was influenced by Minato's courage, he couldn't shake his plan. Enough, Danzo, the enemy is right in front of you. Even if you want to play tricks, you should stop. In the end, he couldn't suppress the anger in his heart. The Sandaime stared at Shimura Danzo angrily. His blood-red eyes were filled with cold light. He was very annoyed. Now that the enemy was at their doorstep, whether Konoha could survive or not was a problem. Chakra was surging in his body, and the Sandaime was obviously showing his determination and position. I hope you don't regret this, Sarutobi. Feeling the Sandame's killing intent, Shimura Danzo's face was livid. He fiercely looked at the silent Minato, and angrily looked at the masked man in the sky, dustless. Chapter 135. The third Hokage's strong intervention cooled down the internal strife, and they began to turn their attention to the masked man in the sky, dustless. What is this guy's purpose? It wasn't just Minato and Sandame who were puzzled. Even Shimura Danzo was very puzzled. Everything had to be done with a motive. Why would Dustless be so straightforward? Even an idiot wouldn't believe it. Minato's thoughts were running wild, and he was distressed. However, Dustless in the sky didn't care what these people were thinking. He raised his hand, and the earth shook. Kakaka. Under the astonished gaze of Konoha's shinobi, countless meteorites once again gathered in the sky, densely packed like ants, covering the entire sky. Sarutobi, what else do you have to say? Immediately released the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. Seeing this, Shimura Danzo looked at the third Hokage with a pale face. He had an impulse to go crazy, and he couldn't wait to put the third Hokage on the ground and beat him violently. With such a terrifying range, there was no way to deal with it other than releasing the Kyuubi. Yes, this guy wants the Kyuubi. Shimura Danzo's words made Minato's mind flash, and he suddenly remembered the Kyuubi, the strongest bijou. For ordinary people, the Kyuubi is the embodiment of disaster. But for people like Dustless, the Kyuubi is a delicious cake. Minato, are you sure? Hearing that the masked man, Dustless, wanted the Kyuubi, the third Hokage's heart fell to the bottom of the valley. His eyes were gloomy as he looked at the thin figure in the sky, and his muddy old eyes showed a trace of understanding. Minato, go support Kushina. This may be a trick to lure the tiger away from the mountain. The third Hokage roared anxiously, and his body was overflowing with murderous intent. He said coldly. From the beginning he wanted the Kyuubi. So what? Dustless, who was floating in the sky, smiled indifferently. He wasn't worried about Obito's success in capturing the Kyuubi, because that kid wasn't a good person. He wouldn't be merciful just because Uzumaki Kushina was his master's wife. Today Obito was more ruthless than anyone. But, I'm the fourth Hokage. Shut up, the safety of the Kyuubi is above everything else, and the foundation of the village. Leave this kid to me. Looking at the hesitant Minato, Sandame Hokage said with dissatisfaction. The worst and best problem of this kid is that he has too much responsibility, and Namikaze Minato wouldn't be of any use here. I understand, Sandame-sama. Minato was not an indecisive person. After struggling for a while, he rushed in the direction of Kushina. As the Sandame said, the Kyuubi was the foundation of Konoha's foothold. Without it, Konoha would be a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Sandame Hokage, you can't compete with me. The conversation between Sandame Hokage and Namikaze Minato was naturally heard by Wuchin, and he shook his head helplessly. He has both the Tensigen and Rinnegan, plus the glint-glinting fruit, which can ignore most physical attacks in the world. If he lost to an old man like Sandame Hokage, he should have fallen many years ago. Dustless, with his strong vision, clearly saw Minato leaving, and he was too lazy to stop him. Anyway, Otsutsuki Hagoromo was watching Obito, and if something unexpected happened, he would follow Dustless's orders and directly kill Minato. Sarutobi, are you crazy? Watching Minato leave, Shimura Danzo's mouth twitched fiercely, and his old face turned black as he glared at the third. Minato was the most powerful of the three. Now that he left, it meant that the only people left to face the masked man would be Shimura Danzo and the third. Whoosh! 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 A dense meteorite rain slammed down from the sky, thousands of them, overwhelming everyone. Once again, all of them roared down, mercilessly falling towards Konoha's ninjas on the ground. Boom! 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 Although many of the meteorites were destroyed by Konoha's ninjas, the scale of the meteorites was too large, and there was not enough manpower to completely clean them up. Many of Konoha's ninjas were smashed into pieces. The endless smell of blood filled the void, and because it was too strong, it didn't dissipate for a long time. Looking at Konoha, although many ordinary people escaped from the battlefield, there were still many who were mercilessly smashed into pieces. Bastard! Seeing this tragic scene, Shimura Danzo shouted loudly, and his eyes were sunken, and his eyeballs were much larger than usual, as if they were about to burst. It was extremely terrifying. I can only use that jutsu. I hope the two-sama will forgive me. Looking at Konoha's hell on earth, the 3RD's face was also extremely ugly. Soon, his sad old face was filled with determination and murderous intent. He stared at Dustless, and the murderous intent in his eyes raged like a tide. Such a deep blood feud must be paid back. The Sandaime Hokage gives off a very gentle feeling, like a kind and benevolent grandpa next door. But before that, there must be a premise, and that is, the other party must not be an enemy. In the face of an enemy, the third will completely take off his mask of kindness and show his violent side as the Hokage. Is it possible that? Hearing this, Shimura Danzo's heart sank. He naturally knew about the so-called jutsu, and it can also be said that the first and second Hokage left behind another precious treasure for Konoha besides the Kyuubi. In this case, we should be able to defeat the masked man. Seeing the third completely take off his mask of kindness at this moment, Shimura Danzo breathed a sigh of relief. His heart that was crushed by the masked man Dustless finally regained some confidence. Crack, crack, crack. The ground suddenly cracked open, and two aged coffins were flipped out of the loose soil. You're tuning in to the Lee Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.